at a later date onto the council's website. So by participating in the meeting, you are agreeing to be part of that recording. There are members of the public in the meeting tonight who are exercising their legal right to record the meeting, and if you want to ask them any questions, then do feel free to approach them. Their recordings are not the responsibility of the council. Thanks very much.
Okay. Just to explain how the committee works, we will have the presentation of the committee report, and then objectors have their opportunity to speak, and the agent has a chance to speak in response. Objectors have 3 minutes, so if there are 2 objectors, then the agent will have 6 minutes. If you are speaking, you've got your 3 minutes. When it comes to the traffic light or amber, that means you've got 1 minute left. And it's very helpful if you recognise that and please stop when it comes to the red, otherwise I will have to ask you to stop. Decisions after the report has been presented and objectors and agents have spoken, it then moves to councillors to discuss, first with questions and then with comments, and then it is that at that point the public are no longer able to speak. And then we will make a decision on every application tonight. We've altered the agenda so that we can take account of the number of people present, and so we're taking agenda item 12 first, which is the 41 to 47 Wimbledon Hill, and then we'll take agenda item 5, which is 44 Arthur Road, then 7, which is 141 Broadway, 9, 21 Parkside, 6, which is Aston Road, 11, which is 21A St Mary's, 8, which is Chenap Court, and 10, Wandle House, and 13, the TPO, the Morden Farmhouse. That will be the order of the agenda. So we're commencing with agenda item 12, which is 41 to 47 Wimbledon Hill Road. Present.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site is located on the north side of Wimbledon Hill Road in Wimbledon Town Centre. The site comprises a group of buildings which are locally listed known as the bank buildings. The site surroundings comprise a mixture of residential and commercial premises. A servicing alleyway serves the site from Compton Road, and there is one vehicle off-street parking space off Allen Road. The proposal itself is for extensions of existing buildings on the site to create a hotel and provide 2 new commercial ground floor units. The hotel will provide 76 rooms, with ancillary reception, community space and meeting rooms. The 2 new commercial ground floor units would have a mixed use class of A1 and A2 use. 2 rear extensions are also proposed and leave a central light well in the middle of the building. A roof extension is also proposed which will provide an additional floor to the existing building. Access to the commercial units will be off Wimbledon Road and access to the hotel will be from Allen Road. So now we're just talking through the plans. This is actually going through some of the existing floor plans at the moment, just showing you the extent of demolition internally to the building proposed. So the areas outlined in dark is proposed to be retained, and the areas in light is proposed to be demolished. So we're looking at the basement plan at the moment, through the ground floor plan, first floor plan, and second floor plan. So the scheme was amended during the application process to retain some of the original features from inside the building to make it work for the proposal. Top floor plan. So turning to the proposal itself, this is the proposed additional basement level. So you'll see at the front, this is the Wimbledon Hill Road here. So the proposed additional basement story will be set back. 4 hotel rooms within that basement with some meeting rooms. The other basement will be the floor above. Hotel gym with other hotel rooms. Ground floor, so the 2 commercial units here. hotel entrance here, and some further rooms on the right hand side. Central light well I referred to earlier is here. So first floor, hotel rooms throughout. And again, second floor, through to the third floor. An additional floor proposed for the building is this top floor plan here. So the hotel's been designed and the reception waiting area space will be actually the top floor of the building. Access through the lifts and central stair court here. So you've got the ancillary space here, which will be used for some breakfast, etc. for the hotel. The hotel's kitchen is to be at the back here. Toilet facilities here. Proposed roof plan. So new floor proposed in this roof. Central light up here. So the extensions to the building coming out here and out here. In terms of the elevations, so this is the proposed elevation up front Alwyn Road, so that's the extension here, and you can also see the roof bridge from beyond. The plans have come out too well, but the actual brick colour proposed is going to be a terracotta red to match existing. Some roof lights proposed here. Some alterations to the building as well, so at the moment there's some unsightly advertisements up on the side, supposed to be moved. Looking at the back of the building, so that's the light well here, extension here, and extension here. To the other side, from the road to the south. And then a view from the front. So at the front of the building, the proposed new roof additional floor up here. It is to be set back from where the bridge is finished on the original sections of the building. In terms of materials, timber frame windows are proposed. In terms of the materials of the roof, they are proposing a zinc flat rock roof tile to the new roof. The glazing is to be aluminium frame solar controlled triple glazing for the new roof. They're also replacing roof tiles on the original part, which has to be maintained. A number of other alterations are proposed in the scheme, mainly to the facade, which include removal of unsightly aircon units, removal and replacement of shop front advertisements, and the introduction of the terracotta pillars. So all those improvements here are largely ground floor level, but the whole building at the front is proposed to be made good, as I said, with replacement throughout. That's just a further setback street scene elevation submitted. Just to put it in context. In terms of section drawings, so looking north, Wimbledon Hill Road here, so you'll see the top floor roof plan is set back from the front. From Allen, with inside the light well part of the building, and from the rear. So this is visual aids with the application. This is one showing it from the front. We also have agents that provided the 3D model here just to assist members with the application. So the roof itself, it wouldn't be a flat fronted roof, it is to be staggered, where the actual tiles element of the scheme would come forward and the glazing would be set further back. Largely sort of a diamond, we could call it formation. Not a 3D visual aid, just from further down the hill. You can see the top of the proposed roof there. And then from this side, so extensions here, commercial use here. In terms of site photographs, so that's quite useful because that's actually a similar position to where that visual aid is. Alwyn Road here. You'll see there's a number of variety of advertisements from the building. Those will be removed. All the aircon units. On the existing roof itself, there is some additions over the years which have happened. So there's a flat roof addition here. But generally speaking, the front of the building is a bit of a poor state in terms of maintenance. And further view just from down the hill. That's at the rear property. Apologies, that didn't come through. Let's just show the gable ends there. Some members draw attention now to the modification sheet. You'll note that a few further objections we've received. We also know we have enough formal confirmation from our climate change officer and environmental health officer regarding the application. Additional paragraph to be inserted in the report on sustainability, and a list of further conditions is recommended to capture their comments. Overall, then, there's a proposal. This is to provide many benefits to the building itself and Wimbledon town centre. The hotel use and commercial ground floor units are appropriate town centre uses which local plan policy supports. A number of visual improvements to the building are proposed, which include removal on slightly existing shop fronts and advertisements. Extensions and new roof extension are considered to be sympathetic designed for the building, and overall proposal will not cause harm to the setting for locally listed building or conservation area. Officers therefore recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
First of all, apologies. I was in my haste to get the meeting started, and I forgot to do apologies for absence. Welcome, Councillor Crowe. Thank you for substituting for Councillor D. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Anybody? Can I just say I do chair the design review panel with Councillor Latif, and neither of us speak or make any decisions on those meetings. We're just there to chair the meeting. Minutes of the previous meeting, are we okay with those? Thank you. I have Lynn Gordon to speak.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here to represent the views of the Wimbledon East Hillside Residents Association, many of whom are with us tonight. The current owners of the bank buildings have been allowing this listed building to decay over the past 10 years, and we very much look forward to its restoration as part of future Wimbledon. However, we urge you to refuse permission for this budget hotel. Many major reports are still outstanding, but this proposal is riddled with issues of concern. First of all, mass. This is a gross overdevelopment of the site and location, involving at least a doubling in size. Heritage. It will destroy an outstanding heritage building in the Wimbledon Hill Conservation Area. Regulations. It will contravene many Merton Council and local London Plan guidelines. Climate change. The building will not be climate change compliant. Flooding. It is likely to upset the delicate water balance at the bottom of Wimbledon Hill, which will impact many local businesses and residents. Air quality and noise pollution. It will further decrease already poor air quality and increase noise pollution in the surrounding area. Quality of life and safety. It will have a serious detrimental impact on the quality of life and safety in the surrounding area, affecting the many schools, workers, visitors and residents. Congestion. It will further congest the footpaths, roads and parking. Crime. The Metropolitan Police have stated several times that the proposed top floor reception would provide an ideal location for drug dealing and prostitution, already a growing problem in this area of Hillside Ward. Finally, need. The London Plan calls for the development of quality hotels, not a budget hotel, with about 20 rooms below ground level. This is sited in a residential community. This is not a requirement for Hillside Ward, which is located north of the town centre, en route to the village, and not in the town centre itself. Merton Council's own conservation area report states, architecturally, the bank buildings are recognised as one of the most magnificent buildings in both the town centre and the conservation area. This will certainly not be the case if you give this application your consent. Thank you.
Lisa, please.
This is the worst planning application I've dealt with in 20 years representing Wirral. It is incomplete, it's misleading, and lacks many key points of substance. The emerging narrative around these buildings is that they're crumbling. They're not worth saving. Last night at the AGM for Love Wimbledon, Helen said, "It looks awful. It's going to fall down." But this is not the case. Yes, Helen, it looks awful. Everything is filthy, shabby. The windows haven't been cleaned or painted in 12 years. Rubbish suddenly appeared. If you were there recently, you'd surely agree the whole place looks a wreck. Yet the bank buildings remain magnificent. The exterior has stood for 134 years and would last another. It has in spades the two things any building needs to ensure longevity: firm foundations and a watertight roof. Has anyone seen the photos proving the slate roofs are in fine condition, lead flashing on all the seams and ridges? It might be old, but it isn't going to fall down in my lifetime. The interior is the epitome of shabby, but given the current owner is running a hostel and a school there, it's clearly entirely functional. We need more reasons than shabby to risk jeopardizing the future of the entire structure. The buildings should be restored and regenerated. It is acknowledged as an embodiment of brand Wimbledon by your case officer, David Gardner, of which Merton sets such store to attract new businesses, and of course the rates that will swell your coffers. Destruction undermines the attraction of Wimbledon to visitors and investors and would badly impact current businesses such as Ely's, Fielder's, Health Zone, and Sticks and Sushi, who all trade on brand Wimbledon, embodied right here in the Wimbledon Hill Road shopping parade. Here are the policies this proposal contravenes: DMD1, D2, DMD4, NPPF, Historic England on facade retention would not normally be acceptable. Merton's Core Strategy Policy 14 on design. CS Policy 6 on licensing specifically talks about using the cumulative impact zone to control the nighttime problems with nighttime economy. And of course, the London Plan, use and do not harm heritage assets. This is Merton's really only heritage asset with a capital A. Retaining a thin facade isn't a refurbishment, as you've described in your own publications. With this monstrous proposal, the value will be lost forever. Thank you.
Bartley Collins, Mark Moritzi, don't have the time, are they?
Good evening. My name is Barnaby Collins. I'm a supporter of this application. This site has a very long planning history, and this application before you mirrors previous concerns for redevelopment behind the facade of the existing buildings. I totally agree that these are very, very fine buildings, and the purpose of the proposals is to make best use of the existing key beneficial features. Ultimately, the scheme is to bring back the building into beneficial use, and I fully support the use of a hotel as being an appropriate town centre use, and to refurbish the existing retail units and to bring them back into beneficial use. Therefore, I fully support the officer's assessment of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, can we put that 3D visual up from the front, please, to the corner? I think what's important to note that with the architects for the development, and we've been working on this proposal for about 2 years and consulted with various firms, including the design review panel, not just the design review panel, but also members of the design review panel afterwards to try and come up with the best possible design, right from the corner top if you can as well. And I think what's important to notice with these 3D views is that I really dislike elevations from many perspective ways, because these are verified views that were produced by surveyors to give you an accurate representation of what the roof form in particular looks like and the context of the extension looks like to the building. We've worked really hard to come up with a really unique solution to this building, which we absolutely love and find is an absolute asset to the area. It is within close proximity to the station. It's a beautiful building that needs its desperate need of repair. The owners of this building have owned it for a number of years and have looked at a number of uses over those years to try and come up with something that's viable on the site. So it is about looking at something that is viable. It is a town centre. It is in Wimbledon, which the client owns a number of buildings. We ourselves are working on several hotel developments around London and work closely with a number of hotel operators. We've actually put it to a number of 3-star operators who are not interested in it. We are currently talking to at least 2 various boutique hotel operators, and we've tried to reinforce that to members and community members that this is a quality offering. We're really not trying to cheapen it up. And you can quite clearly see by the facade of the building, the nature of the building, it demands something special. And both the roof form, the innovative roof design, has really been thought out and consulted on over many, many months to try and present something to you that we are absolutely proud of. And we've looked at obviously all the technical aspects, which I'm sure we will discuss. We've considered all the planning history. We've consulted with members of the public, and also worked really closely with the council to come up with something that we are absolutely proud to present to you tonight. So please just look at all the facts and look at the view that you've got in front of you. There are a number of also views that are presented as part of the documents, which are verified views, which gives you an accurate representation of what the building looks like as seen from the streetscape.
Sorry about that microphone. I don't know whether it's because you're very close to it or whether there's actually something wrong with it. Yeah, apologies for that.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the sort of status of hotelities, that's not for consideration this evening. In terms of both development and heritage, they are both grounds of judgment. The application has been in with us a long time. We've had extensive discussions with the...
Sorry, could you speak up, please?
Mumbling.
We've had extensive discussions with the agent, the application process. Also, amendments to the design. The roof has been set back at the top further. The extension at the back we have enhanced with the detailing, the brickwork, the windows. So it is acknowledged to be an addition, somewhat unusual addition to the building. However, it is modern architecture using modern materials. There are overall lots of other benefits to the scheme, such as improvements to the facade of the building, removal of all the advertisements, 2 brand new commercial ground floor units, ideal for the town centre in Wimbledon. In terms of flooding, our flood risk officer has assessed the scheme and is satisfied with it. Subject to conditions. Further, our structural engineer has also looked at it. This proposal does include an additional basement to the building, and is satisfied that it can be done whilst retaining the building.
Simpson, you wish to speak?
Chair, thank you very much. Thank you very much for calling. I rarely take the opportunity of appearing before the planning committee, and this needs to be something really rather important on behalf of my residents, for me to be here. And this is important. I have been opposed to this proposed redevelopment right from the start. Chairman, this proposal may well tick the boxes in strictly planning terms. But it takes no notice of the detrimental effect that this will have on the lives of local residents, many of whom have lived in competent Alwyn or Worcester roads for many years. And why? Well, because it is a relatively quiet residential area close to the heart of Wimbledon town centre. Now, we all know that the building needs a sympathetic refurbishment, which could be done with a mixed use of offices and retail, and that would be readily acceptable to all. But a 76-room hotel with no parking facilities, no chairman, no real facilities for unloading other than a small loading bay in Thompson Road, or vehicle dwelling on yellow lines on the north side of Wimbledon Road. The access lane off Compton Road is inaccessible other than to a white van. These are two quite narrow residential roads with limited on-road parking primarily for residents, and whatever promises are made about service vehicle timings, they not to disrupt school runs and so on and so forth, and busy peak times, they rarely work in practice, and the developers should know that. The town has at its southern end a new Pecuniary Inn, not yet running at a full capacity. It doesn't need another butted hotel, which this must be with so many rooms in a compact site. We're all aware that the police also have concerns about another licensed premise, with the inevitable possibilities of antisocial behaviour near to so many other licensed premises in the town. Guest parking and pick-up, there's no recess drop-off point for picking up for guests. It is a nonsense to suggest there will be little or no vehicular impact. The hotel owners cannot guarantee that at all, that all people or most people will travel by public transport. Chairman, if there was a real need for a hotel on this site, then I would suggest that any number of hotel chains with vast experience of this type of development will be knocking at the door of the planning department wanting to have a feasibility chat. There is no sign of that. They know that this site is not conducive for the type of development proposed by a speculative developer with no known experience of this type of development. I urge the committee, therefore, to turn down this application.
I do understand that people do have strong views about these things. It would be grateful if we don't applaud speeches. Thank you very much. Moving to members for questions. Councillor McGrath.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions, please. On 6.691, can we just say, can you hear me? Can we just say a bit more about... Hello. Oh, there we go. On 691, could you say a bit more about what the police objections were? The second thing is, the proposals have got an amber from the design review panel. How different are they to the proposals that we've got in front of us? And the third question is, could you just remind us what's happening on the site at the moment? I'm just particularly interested to know the number of people that are using it at the moment as against the number of people that are using it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the police response, we have a response from their counter-terrorism security advisor, looking at a range of measures that could assist with blast-proofing the building, for example. They've also, in terms of the reception of the hotel, so that's proposed to be on the 4th floor. They say it has caused issues with prostitution and drug dealing within the hotel. They say other hotels, they don't say which. They say the reception point at the main entrance hotel is preferable. And they refer to bikes and the parts system attached to thieves, and recommend CCTV system to be installed. The light well does not have an access point for servicing and maintenance, and any such should not be by the guest room. So those are the main things. In terms of the existing building itself, so there is the ground floor commercial units front. There is a language school within the building itself, which we understand is not running at full capacity. And sorry, yeah. So there's part of the building as well. There was one. In terms of DRP, one of the main changes was actually a reduction in the actual overall height of that roof extension. There's always been a rear extension proposed as part of the scheme. So off the top of my head, I don't know what the main differences are in terms of DRP.
Could you let me know, two roads either side, from traffic and highways perspective, what's the limit of size of vehicles that could go up and down those? And are they one way or two ways? And I have further questions after that.
Is it two ways? Are we talking about Alvin Road or both? Yeah. You can go both ways, and you can turn around to Compton Road as well. And there's a loading bay back in Compton Road where they can load and unload during off-peak times. We got peak times with the school times. We got restrictions at between 8 and 9 or 2:45 p.m. to 4 p.m. cannot be load and unload. So we got a mission. It depends. It depends on the quality of what they want. Not many heavy goods vehicles are expected during at any service.
My question is on current roads. Is there a vehicle tonnage restriction in either of them?
There's no restrictions for it.
So currently any size lorry can go up and down both roads?
Correct.
So my second question is regarding the entrance on the ground floor, which it seems is now Alvin Road. What's the width of that? And I can see that there's a ramp, which I'm assuming is for disability. So what's the width of the alley or gap, excluding the ramp?
So the width of the internal hallway is 4 metres.
Not there. Where the reception the back. Where is the reception for that? What's the road for that where it says right?
That's a neighbouring site. That's a neighbouring site. That's a route down to the commercial building to the
Where is the reception in the yellow?
that's the hallway, and the lifts and stairs are here, and the reception's on the 4th floor.
So in terms of the retail outlet in front of it, where is the emergency exit for that? Where do they put their waste? And how do they get their waste there?
In terms of the 2 retail units, so they're frontal wear service in the front, they would simply put their waste out on collection day at the front of the premises. So the service here is for the hotel room.
It's for the shops too.
I asked where is there emergency exits, and in terms of the waste, I'm assuming it's commercial waste. What's the standard procedure for commercial waste? Is it commercial size wheel bin?
Yeah, so the units will be services existing, whether anyone or two requires in terms of servicing for them, in terms of waste.
So in terms of the moment, I'm assuming where this new building is going to go is open land, is it? And I'm assuming their commercial bins are in the open land at the moment, because my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, the council don't allow any waste contractors to place their commercial bins on public ground, do they?
So at the moment, there has been stored at the back here, which serves the building. But as far as we're aware, the commercial waste from these sorts of units can still be serviced from the ground.
So I just wonder if anybody here to answer that, because my understanding from the council with regard to commercial waste is that no commercial waste can be placed on public ground except for collection. And as far as I can tell, and I can't see the inside of this land, that the current commercial waste is placed on the land behind the retail units. The spot which the officers have presented as the waste processing area is not for the 4 retail units. So it seems to me, and sorry, that doesn't mean to sound a statement, but I'm trying to understand how there was a commercial waste area that isn't one, and you're saying that's okay.
So, would it help if we clarify some of the current refuse requirements that we're allowed to? Okay, so there are currently a number of smaller retail units with service out the front of the store. Obviously, the site at the moment has been used for the last few years it's been pretty reckless, to be honest, but the current main refuse requirement is where it currently is located, that side of the building, and it's serviced down that alleyway, which the owner has rights over to the road below. So that is the current servicing requirement. It's an established servicing requirement off the back that is maintained and kept as a principle here. In terms of that smaller retail unit, that is serviced up the front, which is absolutely acceptable for a unit that size. The escape distance is well within the building requirements that doesn't need a secondary means of escape because of the size. The second meeting, which is larger, has a surface access around the rear, but the secondary means of escape due to its size according to the building regulations.
So just to be clear here, what we heard from the applicant is today there are areas within this building for the commercial waste to be cited because the council's policy is that no commercial waste can be cited on public ground. And that's exactly what I could see. And when I checked the regulations, that's what Merton explained, that it can't be, and that commercial waste citing is being taken away. That's the case, and that's what the applicant was just saying, so you don't need to answer that.
Any other questions, please? Councillor Henry.
Chair. Okay, well, officers, please, in details, if you could explain 6.71 for me, and just want to find out, will there be any risk after the construction? So page 150.
just office comments. He's recommended simple conditions on his review of the application. So the conditions in particular condition number 18 specifically refers to groundwater, and so that is scheme to be produced and submitted for our approval with his review process. So that is the proposal.
So do you want me to expand on the process of the building the basement, if I can?
I'm sorry, we just have members' questions now. Thank you. Councillor Merton.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier it was elaborated on regarding the Metropolitan Police's concerns about having the reception on the top floor or the fourth floor, but I'm not really clear how they have been addressed or whether they to the developer or essentially what is being done about them.
Yeah, so they're comments, we have them, but we think the scheme in its current form is okay. We know their comments, we don't think it'd be a reason for refusal. We have put on a condition they've recommended, which is condition number 22, just to assist with details of security measures, to assist with their comments there.
Further questions, Councillor Crone?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit concerned about the traffic issues. I understand about this loading bay, Compton Road, that's presumably for existing businesses taking receipts of goods and whatnot. Is this business about dwelling on single lines, single yellow lines I find peculiar? Have you any idea how much dwelling will go on? I mean, for 76 bedroom hotel, I can imagine quite a lot of vehicles, cars, taxis, minicabs, Uber, you name it. They'll all be coming to these 76 bedrooms, and how much dwelling will there be, please?
It's just to recap, it's in a highly sustainable location. It's only about 300 meters from the Wimbledon station. So it's highly unlikely there are many trips that be generated for the site. Dwell time is could be are you talking about the retail unit? It could be any time as it happens now. But for the hotel accommodation, it could be anywhere. Off-peak time, there are restrictions from 8:30 to 6:30, or during Monday to Saturday. So it could any other time, anyone could park anywhere, even taxi. So within a year, single yellow lines. So it's up to that. We don't expect many trips because it's a highly sustainable location. It's a P-town, it's 6P. That's the highest we can go.
Then ask whether dwelling is really another term for fly parking. People parking on yellow lines, and the yellow lines enforced, and they're just dropping people off and dropping luggage. That's what's being proposed. Fly parking on the single yellow lines is accepted.
Yeah, correct. That's the way.
Chair, if it helps, in their proposed servicing strategy, they outline that they expect 20-minute delivery slots, so with dwelling, it's likely to be around that time. They've also outlined that they would be conducting, obviously, with management, appropriate times for servicing, as Sam was outlined earlier, that it's going to be geared outside of the school peak hours.
Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. Just quite a simple question. How much taller was the previous proposal that was refused?
So, Chair, in terms of the elevations based on that, it was an extension at the back of the building. Looking at the front elevation, so facing Wimbledon Hill Road, it measures at 4.4 metres taller than the lowest ridge on the front. And from Allen Road, it would be 3.4 metres taller than the existing ridge. I do have some figures. So in terms of the current scheme, for example, when measuring from Wimbledon Hill Road, it would be 2.2 metres higher than the lowest ridge of the existing. And from Alwyn Road, it would be 1 metre higher compared to the existing ridge.
Any other questions? Councillor Macon.
When the residents spoke, they talked about not submitting all documents, but they didn't say what documents were submitted. The obvious one is the environmental impact assessment. And has the council been putting pressure on the owners of a listed building to actually retain it, like they have been in other places as well? And if so, why haven't we doing that?
In terms of environmental impact assessment, it's not what's called EIA development. It's not a large enough scheme to be that, so that's not required. In terms of the existing building, it is locally listed, so it was proposed formally with Historic England earlier in the year, I think last year, to be statutory listed, and their report back came back saying they disagree, so they couldn't adopt it as statutory listed building, largely due to the state of the inside and the features that have been lost. So it's a building that really we as a council could not particularly enforce against. It's not the same status as a listed building. But clearly if it gets to a point that it is two things are hanging the building into on the site, then we can step in potentially under conservation areas legislation.
Thank you. There are no other questions? And I'll bring
Can I just ask, this application is before us, has this been given an amber rating by the design of the blue panel or green rating?
It's in the report.
So it's amber rating?
Yes, it is. But it has.
Page 152, 16304, amber.
It is in the report. Councillor Dean.
What does it mean that like class A1 and A2 and C1? Does any of that include restaurants, for example? And if so, I have a follow-up question.
No restaurants.
And what about other eateries, any food?
A1 retail, so you can sell food, but not necessarily be consumed on site. A2 is financial commercial institutions, so estate agents, for example, but no cooked food, hot food on premise.
And in terms of the current, I think there's some extraction fans or air conditioning. As much as we heard they would be removed, of course they can be put back, and they don't need planning permission, do they, to do so? The extractor fans do need planning, but air conditioning don't.
They all do, but it will depend on their size. But, the one, for example, on the front of the building, those ones you see there, they would. They would.
Comments? You've got another question?
No.
Oh. Okay, Councillor Dean.
I was ready for your word of comment. I think that I think it's absolutely right. This locally listed 138-year-old beautiful building should be developed. and I'm pleased that developers come forward to do so. My surprise is that they're basically knocking down the same building and replacing it with something that doesn't respect its listing, nor its age, nor its beauty. The real surprise for me, I've never seen this ever in my 13 miserable years on this committee, is that a flood risk officer has said that groundwater was found within 40 centimetres. 40 centimetres of fault wall. Let's be absolutely clear what 40 centimetres is. It's only that amount. And the basement is significantly deeper than that. If they can find water basically at ground level, I'm amazed that the developer wants to dig out what looks like 100% of this building in basement. That just does not make any sense. And we have mitigation here, but the mitigation has not been proposed by the applicant tonight. So we don't know if any mitigation is going to take place. In terms of the waste, it seems a fact that the waste is dealt with on site currently. And looking at A1 in particular, there will be significant waste which cannot be left out front or around the side at any stage, because the council's clear mandate is that none of this waste can be left on the property ground. But when we're dealing with foodstuffs, you cannot leave that inside either, and there is nothing within the drawings to say that there is any storage, that there is any ventilation, that there is any sort of second outlet for the smell and for the food that can be dealt with. So what's really happening here is a developer has taken the whole site without thought of waste siting, waste disposal, waste collection. They haven't thought about what to do with waste within those individual units. They will clearly, according to Merton Council, have a problem with water immediately, significantly, which is going to upset. And my understanding is that basements shouldn't be more than about 50% of the building. And that's the first point of rejection here, that this is significantly higher than the rules and regulations of this council. The second one is that waste is not dealt with in any way, shape or form. The third thing, if we could have single yellow lines in my road where I can dwell for 20 minutes without a traffic warden giving me a ticket, I would be delighted. But we know the rules, we know the facts, and we know that nobody will be able to stop outside here for more than a few minutes before they get a ticket. And the fourth thing, and I think the police are absolutely right, how strange it is to have a reception at the top of the building. What does the word reception mean? It is where you are received, when you come through a gate, a front door, and the first thing you get is not receiving. You go to lifts, you go to stairs, and then you go to the fourth floor, maybe the first, or maybe the second, or maybe the third. So there is no security whatsoever. How on earth, when you arrive, when you don't have a bedroom key or card, how are you going to be stopped from going to those other floors? There is nothing to stop you. There is no reception. So I think we need to reject this on those significant factors. The police don't agree. Merton's waste collection do not agree. The reception is in the wrong place. Unbelievably, the flood risk officer does not agree. And I think what we need to do is find a bit of space here for waste collection. We need a reception on the ground floor. We need some secondary outlets for the 4 retail outlets in the front there. And we also need to think about the neighbours, and we need extra loading bays. And that's why this is too bulky. There needs to be space for lorries to come off the main road. There needs to be parking for disabled. There needs to be parking for cycles. There needs to be places for waste collection. At the moment, what we see here is something that does not work in any way, shape or form. And I would propose, and I hope my fellow councillors can see that this needs developing, but this isn't the right thing, and I hope everybody votes to reject it.
Any other comments, please?
Could you perhaps see the 3D photograph of the front elevation there? That's the one. Now, when I look at that and I see the kind of new roof light protruding over the top of the existing facade, I'm not at all surprised it's got an amber rating, because I think it looks terrible. And I would just like to draw colleagues' attention to policy DND3A6, which says, where the proposal incorporates a new or altered roof profile, ensure that materials are sympathetic to the original building and the surrounding areas. Well, to my mind, that new roof line isn't sympathetic to what's already there, and that alone is grounds for rejection.
Councillor Sumpkin.
Yes, Councillor Crow's picked on a thing that bothers me actually. I see that the design review panel described it as an amazing top with a cheap and nasty hotel underneath. I might agree with half of that, but I'm not so sure about the roof form. And it does seem to, if you add to it the fact that the roof is not going to extend over the entirety of bank buildings, so you're going to get these structures on top of about 2/3 of it, but the remaining part, all bar what is now, is going to preserve. You need to be able to look up these buildings and see sky behind them, not other looming forms. So just on straightforward design and appearance aesthetics, I think the addition is going to detract from and spoil the impact of the bank buildings, which are some of the best buildings we have really in the industry.
Comments?
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo what Councillor Dean said about security, waste and reception. Now, in Wimbledon is an area where we do have tennis, very busy area, and having been a councillor, as soon as I walk through this door, there's a reception area, I feel welcome. But of course, walking to a hotel, there's no reception area. As you walk in, you have to go to the third floor, possible stairs, lift. Again, security. We look forward to security to be on the ground floor. Those are the things that I have to also, that's been very important. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Ward, sorry.
Thank you. I think we need to be clear where this proposed development is. I was interested in the local ward councillor's comments on it. They both stated that this is in the middle of a residential area, and only seconds later said there's a concern that there are so many licensed premises nearby. My contention is that the residential area doesn't have so many residential premises. This is very, very clearly in the centre of Wimbledon. Yes, there are some residential premises nearby, but it's a town centre location, which looks a bit shabby at the moment. Putting good new retail outlets on the ground floor, and it was explained that they won't be serving cooked food. And so if it is an estate agent and a mobile phone shop, the amount of waste that they will be producing, certainly the amount of smelly waste they will be producing, will be virtually nothing. And like many high streets and town centre areas, there is a once a week time where that's where you put your dry cardboard or whatever waste outside, and that's collected in within the hour time slot or whatever it is. And there's a condition saying that, as we do with virtually every application come before us, there's a condition that says the waste disposal elements must be agreed by the council and in place before the building is completed and stay in place continually thereafter. That's a non-issue. It's a town centre, a dilapidated town centre area with a pub next door, numerous restaurants over the road and round the corner. It's in the middle of a town centre, and we're looking to bring more business opportunities for more retail and a hotel in the middle of Wimbledon town centre, 300 metres from the train station, so that nearly everybody will walk from the train station or the bus stop to get there and back. There are maybe some concerns. It's not, as with every application that comes before us, it's not perfect, but there isn't anything bad enough about it to turn it down on planning grounds. Many of the arguments that I've heard this evening have not been on planning grounds. They've been, I don't really like this. Actually, you need a planning reason to turn it down, but there are many good reasons to pass it. Revitalising and continuing to support the town centre and its commercial activities and bring more, another hotel and more better retail into the town centre. There's no good reason to refuse it and many good reasons to pass this application.
Remember other comments?
I did a comment. Each of those public houses, if you look specifically on Google Maps and visit them, have access for waste, as does every single retailer between the station and Wimbledon Hill. They all specifically have waste. There is no waste for these four, and specifically the council asked that commercial waste is dealt with on the premise. And
You have made that point.
okay, but I just want to be clear that every other one has a waste area.
Now, I want to know whether you want to move a recommendation. Sorry, comment. Okay.
My concern is that it's too big, massing-wise. There is not a place on the premises to actually put the extra vehicles that will determine the hotel, i.e. deliveries, etc., should take place on the premises, not on the main road or the side roads. And also, there is no disabled parking for basically disabled people. They use the hotel, but excluded part of the population. Now, as a committee, we should not be doing that. If we want to agree a hotel, it should be available for everybody, not the undisabled.
Yes, so DND 3.7 is 7. And bulk massing, and that's however you want to say it. I think that's DND 1, isn't it? And I'd also add that, in my opinion, 3 things have to happen. That waste collection has to be 100% supported by Merton Council, that the water issue has to be eradicated 100%.
I think, can I say to that, you think you've made those points before, so I just need to know your...
That's my recommendation, that those 2 things have to happen.
Okay.
And the third one is that the police have to deal with the reception. That reception has to be on the ground.
I mean, there's a number of issues being raised, and maybe it's worthwhile going through those in a little bit of detail. Certain reasons have been raised for potential refusal. Based on mentioned in terms of flooding, obviously our planning officers look and are satisfied that that's going to be okay. Waste, members have views on that, you've expressed those already. Traffic, we've got that issue where concerns have been expressed. You've heard from the traffic officer that those are being sorted out on the site and the surrounding streets. The reception at the top is an interesting one. We've got a number of hotels with receptions on the top floors. It didn't seem to be a problem. There's maybe issues I haven't thought about that have been raised. I'm not convinced that's a ground for refusal. It's an operating matter for the hotel, I would say, in these particular terms, unless someone's demonstrated a particular issue. I mean, police have raised it as a matter, but it's speculation. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen. So in terms of using that for a ground for refusal, I would imagine that would be more difficult to defend. Now, the other matter is a subjective issue in terms of the height, size of the building. What I would say is, while you see this extension of the top floor, this is an elevation perspective. You don't obviously stand in that particular position. When you're walking on the street, it's very likely that's quite well set back on top of the building. You're probably not likely to see it very clearly. If you go to the other views, you can see For instance, there, if you actually that's a perception of that particular position, you only see a very small amount of it. I understand the issue regarding materials that's been mentioned. Also, materials are quite relatively simple to deal with. That's a particular issue for next time. I think, it wants to amend that in a particular way. But in terms of the actual appearance of the building, height and scale, etc., if we go back to the plans, it's quite a marginal rise in terms of the size of the central areas on the roof, and they are, as I say, they are set back quite well from the front of the building. Just thought I'd make those points. So in terms of
Thank you for those points. So DM D3.7 and programmatic, and I think that DMD1, they are too specific for us. But my proposal to reject on.
Just struggling with DM D3.7, that's the one about the
materials are sympathetic to the original building.
yes, thank you.
Sorry, did you say you did?
Yes, we covered that, yes.
Okay. Do we have a second now? Okay, oh, good. So vote then. Those in favour? Those against? So, and not voting? Okay. So we will put the full recommendation to the committee. Those in favour of the recommendations as printed in the report, please show. Those against? And not voting? Then the recommendations are carried. We now move to agenda item 5, which is 44 Arthur Road.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the site comprises a detached 1930s house on the south side of Arthur Road in Wimbledon. The site has been a conservation area. This is the existing site plan. The proposal itself is for replacement dwelling, including additional landscaping. Talking through some existing plans. So, existing ground floor footprint here. You know, it happens outlined neighbouring properties on both sides. So that's the front elevation that's existing, sides and rear. So largely untouched. This is its original construction. Black position there. Proposal itself, so the replacement dwelling application comprises the ground, first and second floor. This is the proposed site plan. So what you can see outlined, obviously in black, is the proposed essentially ground floor plan. In blue is an outline of a previous permission granted back in 2007 for replacement dwelling on the site, and then pink is outline of the existing property. The proposal also includes some re-landscaping and additional planting in the rear garden, and also at the front. The driveway accesses as two, they will remain as existing. There's a proposed block plan showing the roof. So, ground floor plan. That's the front. Proposed dwelling is a contemporary dwelling proposed, so we'll come on to the elevations shortly. But you see some of the elevations staggered on angles. At first floor level, you see bedrooms throughout, stair floor down the middle. Second floor level, a couple of bedrooms within the roof. Turning to the elevations, so that's the proposed side elevation. Materials will be linked to brick, render, stone, and bronze cladding to the roof. Outlined in blue is a previous consent back in 2007 for replacement dwelling. This is the view from the front. So the roof form and the general design, lots of rectangular form, as I say, contemporary in its approach. Render brickwork, stone detailing as well, and the bronze cladding roof. Looking at the rear, lots of glazing proposed. And again, the side elevation. So you'll see from the design from the sides that the roof form is lower, slightly at the front, and rises up as it goes towards the back. That's just a street scene aspect proposed. Colour visual submitted with the application, just to help put it into context from the back. And there's a sort of colour 3D visual showing it with the neighbouring properties on the road. Landscaping, I mentioned earlier, proposed trees from the dark green, so there's a number of proposed additional trees and re-landscaping proposed with the scheme. Turn to some site pictures, that's the existing rear elevation of the property. Another one to the left, to the right, so off the road is a slight hill incline, so the left hand side slightly higher up and right. That's a view from the top floor window looking at the back. And quality of the left sideways. Really, that's just a view from the front, and the front driveway. Right, that's in the front. So drive, swing around, and number 2 entrance points. So members, some modifications in the modification sheet for the proposal. You note some additional letters of objection, letter of support from the agent. Overall, members, the proposal is replacement dwelling within a conservation area. In regard to the site's context and existing dwellings to be removed from the surroundings, officers are satisfied that the proposal would serve the appearance of the conservation area and can be appropriately sited on the site. Officers,
I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to read the agenda item on modifications. There's quite a bit on Arthur Road, so just give you a couple of minutes to have a quick read from that to make sure we can talk about everything. enough time? I'll start with the comment. Could I have Eric Julian, please?
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Eric Julien. I'm the next door neighbor at 42 Arthur Road, and speaking also on behalf of 46 Arthur Road and Stable Cottage in Leopold Road. We have submitted supporting material, which I will be referring to in my speech. Our objections are as follows. Bulk and mass, illustrated by figure 1 and 2. Demolishing a 5-bedroom house to rebuild a 6-bedroom almost 3 times bigger is a waste of resources with a lot of disturbance and upheaval, which doesn't produce any more residential units that currently exist. Such is the increase in bulk and mass that the submitted plans you have in front of you use as a comparison not the existing building, but the much larger lab 2007 airport scheme. This trick allows masking the true impact of this project. Finally, we see the eco-friendly arguments presented for this 6,800 square feet 6-bedroom house as a pure marketing exercise. Character of the conservation area. The buildings in part of the conservation area have a distinctive step building line as seen on figure 3. The front building line in conservation area should be sacrosanct, yet the scheme extends substantially beyond this line. The separation between built is a strong pattern in the area, yet the scheme suppresses it completely on the ground floor with 42 and reduces it significantly on the first floor. The conservation officer's comment at paragraph 6 of the committee report. For property to be replaced, we must strive for architecture of outstanding merit so that the loss of a house that forms part of the character of the conservation area is not lamented. It is felt that this current proposal does not achieve the design requirement to fulfill this objective. On any reasonable reading, this is an objection, and I don't understand how the opinion of the council own expert has been set aside and converted into an approval, especially where there are no other benefits of the scheme to offset against the harm to the conservation area. All new developments have made extra effort to enhance the character of the area for the enjoyment of everyone. There are no such efforts with this scheme. The new house just doesn't sit comfortably with the scale and materials of neighboring older houses. I strongly agree that modern architecture can sit comfortably with historic context, but as a conservation officer reminds us, it is important to consider scale, massing, and materials. Finally, we are very disappointed with the consultation process of this application. We were not properly and thoroughly consulted. The site notice of the planning application disappeared after a week. We first invited the case officer for a visit, but never got a response. Thank you.
Pecuniary Morales.
Good evening, Madam.
If you would mind turning your microphone off, please. Many thanks.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Pecuniary Morales, and I'm speaking on behalf of the residents at 42 and 46 Arthur Road. Our objections relate to the following. Loss of privacy. The proposed scheme will enable occupiers of the new house to overlook directly our terrace at number 42 from the proposed first floor window, as shown on figure 5. Our terrace is the main living area for our family in fine weather where we eat and socialize. At present, it is a secluded spot protected from overlooking by an evergreen hedge. The proposed scheme will fundamentally change this by adding an extension with a flat roof. It is so deep that if people stand on it, they could look backwards towards our house and into the main living room at ground level, as well as upwards into the bedrooms, as seen on figure 4. All of this will cause a significant loss of privacy to an intrusive and uncomfortable degree. In addition, a roof garden is to be constructed on the second floor, which will look directly into the bathrooms, kitchen and dining room of number 46. Although a screen is mentioned, no information has been provided of how this will prevent overlooking and massively reducing privacy to these sensitive spaces, as seen on figure 7. Loss of outlook. The new house will project beyond the existing front and rear building lines and will block off the open aspect our house currently enjoys to the west. It will hem us with walls built right on the boundary, removing our outlook to the front and rear. Additionally, we will have a 3.725 meter wall running deep into the back garden, as per picture 4. The extension to the rear will severely impact the outlook to the kitchen dining room of number 46. As the new building will rise sheer to the boundary of 46, it will loom above the kitchen conservatory, which will be deprived of sunlight from noon onwards. These problems that this scheme will cause to 42 and 46 are completely unnecessary. It is perfectly possible for number 44 to be replaced by a substantially larger building than that which is on site at present, but which is substantially smaller than the application scheme. Such a building will not extend to both boundaries and beyond the front and rear building lines, and will not bully its neighbours and externalize its impacts on them as the present application does. This is a greedy development that pays no regard to its setting or its context, and we ask members of the committee to refuse planning permission for its selfish development. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Helen Greenhill. Can you switch your microphone off, please? Let me just focus. Yeah.
Okay. This application took many months of thought and preparation to create an amazing house for the applicants to live in for years to come. It is their dream family home. They appointed a local architect with flair for designing contemporary houses and developed an initial scheme for pre-app discussion. The planning team were positive about the contemporary design and agreed demolition was acceptable, considering the previous planning permission, but did want a couple of changes which were subsequently incorporated. We are pleased that the case states earlier on in her assessment that the existing dwelling has little heritage significance, as this has always been the council's position, bearing in mind the previous approval allowing demolition and it not being referred to in the conservation area appraisals, making a positive contribution. We are therefore surprised that the conservation officer seems to suggest otherwise, especially as the conservation team had previously, with the approved scheme, said that the existing house is not one which is considered to make a positive contribution to the conservation area character. The planning officer seemed well aware of this, however, and that the requirement for the decision maker is to pay special attention to the desirability, preserving and enhancing the character and appearance of the conservation area, and not that suggested by the conservation officer. Arthur Road is characterised by a mix of buildings with architectural variety along with strong design elements and decorative details, which combine to create a sense of harmony in the street. The proposals respond exceptionally well to this character by replacing the rather average-looking house with one that is quite the opposite. It is unashamedly contemporary but still incorporates key elements of the conservation area and has distinctively bold features and detailing and continues the theme of architectural variety in the road. It maintains the step nature of properties, so the scale and keeping with other houses, allows views through to the rear, uses materials reflective of the area, retains the historic brick wall at the front, and incorporates a landscape garden by an award-winning landscape architect. Overall, the proposal delivers a high-quality design response, harmonising with the street and preserving the character and appearance of the area. In terms of the amenity concerns of neighbours, the building is much larger than the existing house, that is true, but so are the adjoining houses, which have been extended front, back and sides and are probably now double the size they were originally. The height of the proposal is actually lower than the previous permission. In terms of the additional information submitted to the committee, the various markups and figures are artist's impressions and not dimensionally accurate. Also, I noticed that they've chosen to disregard the previous planning permission when undertaking comparisons. The upper floors of the proposal do not extend beyond the rear building line of 42. The ground floor element of the boundary is set in by 1.6 metres behind the 2 metre brick wall. The annotated photo submitted showing a view of number 42's outdoor seating area shows hatched areas over the top of the existing foliage, making the appearance of single-storey elements appear larger. The upstairs windows indicated are no different to the relationship that number 42 has presently with the application site. There are no external balconies or high-level terraces that overlook number 42. In terms of the relationship with number 46, the proposal is set back from the boundary on all floors to reflect the existing house and previous approval. The southeast corner of first floor does not extend beyond that approved before, and the windows on the top floor serve a landing and are set back behind a 2 metre screen to prevent overlooking. To sum up, we hope that the committee will appreciate the merits of this proposal and agree that it would deliver a positive addition to Arthur Road without compromising neighbours or the conservation area, and we request the committee approves the application. Richard Oren.
Thank you, Chair. I am Richard Oren. Alongside my wife, I'm the joint applicant with respect to the planned work at 44 Arthur Road. I'd like to reaffirm to the committee our personal commitment to building a home that, as well as meeting the long-term needs of our family, seeks also to minimise any adverse impact upon our immediate neighbours and enhances the attraction of the wider conservation area. We bought 44 Arthur Road in December 2017. We've lived in our present house on Dora Road, a mile away from the Arthur Road site since 2006, having previously lived in the South Park Gardens area. As long-term residents of the borough, the attraction of 44 Arthur Road derived from its secluded location, large back garden and the potential for renovation and extension that the existing house presented. However, after exploring this option with a range of architects, it became clear that any plan to renovate would be fraught with complication. The house had been owned and occupied by the same family for over 40 years, and during this time very little work had been done by way of modernisation. The volume and uncertainty of the work required to bring the house up to modern standards prohibited this option. Exploring the possibility to demolish and rebuild, we engaged local architect Keith Malone, partly due to his knowledge of the area, but specifically his commitment to high quality design evidenced by his previous work. We developed our design with him over more than a year, always seeking to be mindful of its significance within the conservation area and the implications for the neighbours. We sought the advice of council planners through the pre-application process and complied in full with all their suggested amendments. 44 Arthur Road will be our family home for the foreseeable future. Our commitment to high quality design will be matched by the high quality of the materials used in its construction. We've always been aware that modern design may divide opinion, however we firmly believe that our proposals both retain and enhance the character of the conservation area.
Questions? No questions. Goodness me. Councillor Lanning.
Okay. 8.7. I know the refuge purpose storage. Okay. Has it been addressed?
Microphone.
It's on page 20.
Oh, yeah. Bin storage is indicated at the front of the site, so the dwelling is set very far back from the front, so it is actually indicated here. It's just what we mean is limited details to the elevations of the storage units as we provide.
Thank you.
Councillor Lanning.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. The first relates to policy DMD4F, which is cited on page 18, paragraph 8.2.5, and that says that the conservation or reinstatement lost of features that contribute to the asset of its setting, that the proposals must have regard to that. So should we assume, because this is sort of a modern redevelopment, that there are no features that contribute to the asset or the setting? And the second question is that is there already a permission for the demolition of the building and also permission for the build of a new home on the site?
Yeah, in terms of the DMD4, that is within the conservation area, so what we have to look at is what does the existing dwelling contribute towards the wider conservation area. It is 1930s build. It is set amongst other properties that have been extended over time. So with the previous, there was a previous commission in place in 2007, albeit it wasn't implemented for replacement dwelling. The design of that replacement dwelling proposal was a typical 15-tile house, obviously bigger than the existing one. You've seen some of the outlines on the plan. But the key test is that preserve or enhance the character conservation area. So the street is mixed, the dwelling's character is mixed. There's a variety of dwellings there. You have some of the more older, larger Victorian mansions on the opposite side of that road, which are more spacious. On this side, they're slightly more formal and set together, you can say. So with the new proposal, although contemporary in its appearance, it is to be constructed materials that do reflect some of the wider parts of the conservation area. There are some contemporary dwellings within Arthur Road, not many, but there are some in the street. So overall, we consider that contemporary dwelling here can be supported in the conservation area.
More questions? Sorry, can I just heard them? Councillor Southgate first.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard assurances from the agent that neighbour amenity and privacy is sort of protected. Like, that particular sketch would suggest to me, but that there's a plethora of sort of sitting out spaces there, particularly over the extended sort of canopy area on the level. Do we condition this? Do we say that those can only be accessed for maintenance or what?
Yeah, so none of those areas there you can see are proposed to be used for an outdoor terrace. It's common practice to condition that. So condition 10 does prevent them from sitting out there using it as a balcony, for example. There is one area proposed to be used. I thought it was this area here, but it's not actually shown. Apologies. Sorry, I thought that was inside. That bit is outside. It's a very small area here, and so this there is to be screening here, which we have conditioned them to submit the details to us on condition 13. So it's a very small area here, set back, but what we would expect here is appropriate screening, a solid structure so you can't see through.
Okay, on page 19, 8.2.9, it's stated that there will be a gap. Will that gap affect residents on the other side or in any way? Please.
Can you repeat that, sorry?
Okay, page 19, 8.2.9. In paragraph it's stated, there will be a gap. Will that gap affect neighbours in any way?
So the gap, in terms of the pattern here, the gap referred to are gaps between the dwellings both sides. So there's this side is proposed to fill that gap only at ground floor level. There is an existing single-storey structure up to the boundary of this side at the moment, and this side is proposed to retain the access gap as well. So that paragraph 8.2.9 is more about views through the plot in terms of streetscape rather than anything else.
Any other questions, Councillor Craven?
It seems to me that this new modern design, if it was not in a conservation area, it would be absolutely fine, but it is nonetheless in a conservation area. And if one looks at page 15, paragraph 6.3.1, the conservation officer says, for a property to be replaced, we must strive for the architecture of outstanding merit, so that the loss of a house that forms part of the character of the conservation area is not lamented. It is felt that this current proposal does not achieve the design requirements to fulfil this objective. But if that's the view of the council's conservation officer, can you give us some guidance as to what weighting we should give that in our decision this evening?
Yep, they are an internal consultee. The key thing with this application is that actually the key test isn't, is it of outstanding merit in terms of this architecture. That's not the key test. The key test is, does it preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area? So you take into account a combination of a loss of the existing building and you look at the proposed new building. But because in its context it's set amongst more of a more modern, you could say, properties in that street scene, and the materials to be used, we are satisfied with that the new dwelling would preserve the conservation area, and the modern architecture here can be supported. In terms of weight, it's really a matter for the decision maker.
Comments? Councillor Merton, do you put that up?
I was just going to ask about trees, but I found it.
Okay. So comments then, please. Yeah, Councillor Ward.
Thank you. To start with, the right picture, I don't have a problem with bulk massing. It's, roughly the same height, roughly the same width. It's a bit deeper than the existing house. It's comparable, as was mentioned by the applicants, it's comparable to the houses next door either side. It's described as an amazing house, and I think architecturally it looks beautiful. Well, the problem is that in many cases like this, when you demolish a house and rebuild, you often keep the facade and build behind, so it stays in keeping with the rest of the area. Or when a new build, an entirely new build, that doesn't keep the facade as proposed, at least some of the architectural features are in keeping with the houses next to either side and in the rest of the area. As I say, it's a beautiful design. I'm sure it would be a beautiful house. But why do we assign areas as conservation areas and then decide with the houses nearby, which are all brick and eaves and slate roofs and typical 30s, 40s houses, that you're going to build a mostly glass. I'm not going to use some pejorative words about it. Building, which is just not in keeping with any of the houses around it, as far as I can see. You know me on this committee, I'm loath often to go against officers' decisions, because often I think some objections are not based on real planning law, but this is a case, it's a conservation area, and it's not just a little bit out of keeping with the rest of the houses in the area, it is completely alien. It is like dropping, I can't describe just how alien it is to all the other houses around it, and I think on those grounds, in a conservation area that is entirely out of keeping with the rest of the buildings in the area, we have to just go to refuse this. I can't see. It's fine as a building. I'm sure it hits all the energy efficiency and the number of rooms, and it's not too big, but it's just awful compared to all the other buildings in the area, and I think we need to refuse it on those grounds alone.
Any other comments? Councillor Sake.
I think a lot of what Councillor Ward says is true. It is alien. I wouldn't describe it as awful. And I'm struck also by the conflict almost between the assessor and the conservation officer and the case officer. So what's the test, really? Can we swap one building out for another? If that's the critical measure, then I think the present house is not remarkable. And this could well be an improvement on it. But it's called a conservation area. I'm not sure I've got I've worked my way through to a solution on this one yet. But so an area is not just one house, is it? It implies a certain homogeneity. Now, you may tell me that there's a sufficient mix of different housing types that this, and I know elsewhere in Arthur Road we have accommodated some quite dramatic contemporary architecture. I'm not. The agent also does a fairly effective job in deconstructing the conservation officer's defence of the existing house. So I'm not sure the existing house is worth saving, but it is nonetheless far more cohesive within the conservation area than what is now proposed.
Are there any other comments? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. While I don't necessarily disagree with Councillors Waterhouse and Southgate, I think we have a challenge in that a previous permission was granted for the demolition of the entire building, which would suggest that there aren't features which are worth necessarily saving or retaining for erecting a new dwelling, and we have permission granted for a new dwelling to be built. So while this might be out of place or out of keeping, we have already agreed that it's not worth saving. So I think that is an issue.
Do we have a recommendation? Yeah.
If I could just briefly address that point and then go to the recommendation. My understanding that the planning permission for demolition and rebuilding was to rebuild in a similar style, and that permission is 12 years old, so it has that lapse, which is the question. And secondly, yes, I have a recommendation that we refuse this on the grounds that it's out of keeping with the conservation area, architecturally out of keeping with the conservation area.
Yeah. Right. What's the previous replacement of the modern building in the past?
So, Chair, the replacement dwelling in 2007, you can just see our own blue here. It was what we would call a sort of typical neoclassical design. So it would have been a new building, but in a sort of neoclassical design. There's actually something similar nearby been constructed, but it wasn't particularly unique, to be honest. But what we have proposed here is modern architecture, but with use of some traditional materials to assist with the conservation area character. So in the street scene, yes, you'll go past and go, it's an interesting visually interesting building, and I would, in my opinion, be visually more interesting than the one back in 2007. But the one back in 2007 has that, just to confirm.
Okay. Can I just ask about the other buildings in the same area? Are these there uniformity?
So in terms of other buildings shown, so we get on the map. So opposite is much more, the Victorian sort of mansion blocks. They're very large, very tall. That's the building here. There's a block of a Victorian detached building here, but that has consent for 3 houses in the garden, which are under construction, along with conversion to 5 flats. There's a row of properties here. You see from some of the pictures, typical brick and tile properties. But again, in visual terms, nothing particularly special. The modern neoclassical houses I mentioned earlier that are actually here have been constructed. So, like a sort of typical Georgian windows with a slate roof. So, yeah, I mean, and you've got a more modern cul-de-sac down here. So, at the end of the day, it is a judgment. But the key test is, does it fail to preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area? And it is the wider conservation area, not just this particular building and particular site that it's on.
Okay, so we've got a recommendation and a seconder, so I'm going to put that to the vote. On the grounds of, sorry, can you repeat your recommendation? On out of
I'll be guided by officers, but architecturally out of keeping with the
conservation area.
The conservation area.
It's written on site, you share. We'll use the word design as well, but that's it's written on site.
Okay, can I see those in favour? Okay, those against? Not voting? So that's refused? No. Well, do I have to go back and take the full recommendation then as it's in the report? Can I see those in favour, please? Those against? I'm not voting. Thank you. So the recommendation is carried. We now move to agenda item 7, which is 141 the Broadway.
Chair, I can't vote for this.
You can't vote on it.
Chair, sorry. I've got my leg from that right away.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll be grateful if you could take your seats, please. Thank you. So we're doing agenda item 7141 Broadway.
Thank you, Chair. Members, 141 the Broadway, on the south side of Broadway, Wimbledon Town Centre. It's been to committee twice before, with 2 deferrals, and the recent deferral was in the July Plan Committee meeting. The reasons for the deferral was to see if the applicant could address the Met Police Design Commissioner's comments submitted on the proposal. What you have before you tonight is an amended scheme to help try and address those. So I'll just go through that with you. Members, the previous scheme had the entrance to the residential aspect of the scheme purely on the side here. The police noted in their previous response that they thought that would potentially lead to increase in crime to each resident. So the applicants have changed the scheme to now put the access to the residential element to the front of the building here. So by doing that with a simple sort of single-storey side section to the building, other enhancements have included additional planting here, and 2 trees with plant beds are proposed here and here at the front as well. The bin storage has been formalised here for the residential, with the commercial bin waste to be here, access to office, commercial yard. So the ground floor at the back here is access to commercial unit only, which is the restaurant. Lots of other aspects of the scheme remain the same in terms of the flats, the numbers, the layout. So this is just going through the floor plans, which we've seen before. So elevation-wise, essentially from the front of the building here, there's the residential entrance point here, is the addition. To the side, so the way it's been designed is to have lots of floor-to-ceiling glazing to make it a light space with the hallway. It's showing there. The landscaping, which is turned sideways unfortunately, additional landscaping proposed, which is down here. This is the road over here. Further additional planting was proposed at the back here as a change. Further to this, they've outlined positions of CCTV cameras to be installed, which are outlined in red. You can just see here. So there's the entrance hallway, CCTV proposed. Also, lighting is now proposed to help light this space to make it more secure. And that's the blue dots here. And there's some further details of the balconies. Just the photographs, just to help remind you. The historic docs are slightly dated now because the Premier Inn has been completed next door. but as is that is the site here, office building next door, very in there. Let's view from the side. So overall, Chair, officer satisfied that the applicant has sought to address the Met Police's comments and reasons for the deferral agreed on the July committee. Officer therefore recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
So, Sarah Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. As we know, this is the third time this application comes to this chamber. Whilst it is the norm for a developer to focus on the residential housing element of a project and then tag on the commercial entity, this developer has done the exact opposite. Although he has met some of the requirements of the Met Police, he's now placed the front door to the 20 residential flats on the Broadway to meet security and safety. I still think that this proposal is still lacking, and I would like you to tag on some conditions. The entrance hallway to the front door is only 1.2 metres wide, which is the minimum allowed for a residential development. And I request that a condition is made to make this front door at least 1.6 metres wide. My own front door in my own home is 85 centimetres, and the hallway is about 1 metre 10. It doesn't allow two people to pass, so this would make it really difficult with such a narrow entrance. What is the width and height of the corridor or the hallway? There are no measurements given in the application. It needs to be wide enough to make it safe and comfortable for the circulation of buggies and people with mobility, residents with bags of shopping, or just more than two people trying to enter and exit. Also, what about delivery of white goods and furniture? The wider it is, the higher it is, the more likely the corridor itself won't get scuffed and damaged. The applicant has more than about 4 metres of alleyway to play with, so there's no need for a constrained entry to this development. I'd like a condition to ensure that the residential waste recycling, commercial waste and recycling and servicing will all take place from the Broadway, just as it happens for the Premier Inn. The balconies, I'd like a condition to reduce the depth to 1.1 metres from the 1.5 metres. The officer has said that they have already reduced it, but it is only by 20 centimetres to 1.5. The balconies are still very intrusive. They need to be further curtailed. They should at least match the rear at 1.1. On materials, I request that there's a condition on materials, the brick detailing. I would like to see some more brick detailing on the front, rear and western flanks. The brick and glass quality can make or break a building. It needs to be of the highest quality. I would also like to see some bat and swift boxes, bricks inserted in this development, which will only cost a few pounds. I think that's really all I want to say. I know you're going to approve it, so please ensure that you have these conditions inserted to make this a better development. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah Jones.
Good evening. I own one of the many properties that will be overlooked by this development should it gain planning permission. I want to make it clear that I'm not against the development of this site, and I welcome the minor revisions that have been done so far. I do, however, object to the development due to a lack of documentation which I believe was essential for granting planning permission. Firstly, I believe there was a loss of daylight and sunlight to my property and many other properties surrounding it due to the massing changes proposed. I have not yet seen a report on daylight or sunlight that includes my property and demonstrates that the impact it might have, whether there is any loss and whether this is acceptable in a planning policy. Secondly, I object to the provision of the new south-facing balconies on the proposed development, the second, third, fourth and fifth floor levels, and the distance they will have from my amenity space. They will, consequently, now not be private and will be overlooked, as will many others in the surrounding gardens. Original requests from the developer were for higher balconies of 1.8 metres that were opaque. I would welcome these designs back. In addition, taller trees at the edge of the property, particularly to the rear and side elevations, would be good, and I recognise they have already looked at this to prevent my and many others' neighbours' private amenity space. Finally, it is too difficult to tell exactly the impact on the property this property will have on the surrounding area. No artist's impressions have been produced showing the visual impact the development will have. The Planning Committee have actually asked for this in the past, requested the line of sight architect's impressions showing the development in context with the surrounding properties, with views taken from the front, side and rear to demonstrate how imposing and how overlooked the development will be. These documents have either not been developed or have not been added to the planning portal. I strongly urge the Planning Committee to ask for a complete set of documents including daylight and sunlight reports and visual impact diagrams. I also request that these documents are used to consider if the scheme overlooks the neighbours too much, and if so, edits should be made to minimise the impact, ideally through setting back the building further, taller opaque balconies to the rear and sides, and increased trees. Thank you.
Could I ask a question now?
No. Sorry.
I need to know where that is.
I think she said where you lived. You did say where you lived, did you?
I live to the rear of the property, to the rear of the development.
Okay. Sandeep Barbara is.
Peter Mudley's going to go first.
You're going to share, so Peter first, sir.
Thanks, Chairman. Committee, as you've heard a number of times, we're before you the third time seeking planning permission. I do have an additional request, and that is a decision is made this evening. I think it's fair enough now for our client who's been waiting since March 2017. It feels like a long time, and we would like a decision. I'm going to read the last sentence of the July minutes, if I may. The committee voted to defer the item so that there can be further consideration of the Met Police's advice regarding the entrance. In summary, that advice was the entrance should be relocated to the front of the building, should be lockable gates towards the front entrance, and that ideally there should be no direct linkages between the two uses. Also advised that a host of standard security systems such as CCTV be fitted. As I think you probably all now understand, I can confirm that since July and that committee there's been close liaison between ourselves and the Met Police. As a result, the scheme has come before you and it's changed. We have the front entrance and we also have the extensive landscaping improvements, which were a concern last time out. Over the last two meetings, you may well recall how we've established that both the design panel and the council design officer were satisfied with the earlier iterations of the scheme, which arguably lacked the finesse of the current version. Significantly, the planning inspector in 2016 found an even earlier version acceptable too. We've explained clearly why there's no affordable housing, though that may change with the provision of a late-stage viability review, how the standard of accommodation is high, how the scheme meets sustainability requirements, and how it won't impact actually on neighbouring amenity. In the committee report, there is an extensively long section at 7.6 which outlines issues in regards to daylight sunlight, outlook and privacy. I note what the main objector has said. In fairness, all of the concerns are relatively subjective matters. My architect colleague will comment on one or two of them, and they've been discussed at length in the previous two meetings. On the basis of the above, or on the basis of what you've heard, what you've seen, I'd ask you to consider the 2 years and 7 months this application has been with you, and the undoubted improvements that have been made to the scheme are as a result of the committee's own work, that of officers, consultees and yes, even objectors, and grant planning permission in accordance with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I only have one clarification to make.
the access way, taking the residential route into the main core is 1.2 metres wide, which is in line with the London Plan standards.
It's minimum.
Thank you.
Yes, Jeff, I know there were some proposed conditions raised earlier in the presentations. We can't accept a condition to make the front entrance wider than it's shown on the plans, because the development rules of the plans before you. Condition on waste reserve on Broadway, well that will be the case, as there is to be no vehicle access with this proposal. Condition to reduce the depth of the balconies. Again, the plans before us, we can't change the plans before us by condition. The balconies have been looked at extensively. Our design officer has been involved with that. Materials condition is on there. Pattern slip boxes to be installed. I think, to be honest, given the town centre location, it's not particularly desirable, but that is something that we could impose on. So we could accept that as a condition.
Okay. We have discussed this application at some significant length, and we are just looking at the changes that we requested. So are there any questions around those changes? Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies if this is something that was raised at a meeting. I wasn't there. It's obviously disappointing that no affordable housing can be factored into this development, time and location. But I note on page 77, 10.1.6, the council's liability assessor recommends that the council does implement mechanisms to monitor this throughout the development. Can I ask if this is something that needs to be conditioned to ensure that it does happen, or if it will happen as a matter of course?
Yes, that's to be included within the 106 agreement itself, so those mechanisms will tie within the 106 agreement rather than condition.
Thank you. On the plans we have on the screen before us, in that grey hatched area at the back, the white areas there, those are the waste bins for the restaurant, which are to be collected from the Broadway, so it needs to go up that, again, grey shaded area outside there. So regarding the, I know you just said that we can't attach it as a condition, but regarding the possibility of widening the entrance corridor from 1.2 metres to 1.6 metres, would the upshot of that make that alleyway too narrow to push the wheelie bins up?
Yes, it's 4 metres.
It's about being too narrow, but it makes it narrower, but I can't confirm that would be too
4
narrow.
metres.
Are there any other questions? Any comments?
Yes, I would like to propose that we add the condition about the Swift boxes, please. Did we? Well, I wasn't sure whether it needed formally to be said, so if it does, I'm saying it. Thank you.
Can we move to the vote then? Those in favour of the application, please show. And those against? Not voted. Then the application is recommended. We're 21 Parkside.
Thank you, Chair. Number 21 Parkside is a detached 2.5-storey dwelling on the north side of Parkside, overlooking Wimbledon Common and the War Memorial. The proposal is for a replacement dwelling. That's the existing site plan there. The replacement dwelling to including a basement and accommodation within the roof. talking through the existing site, so it's the existing building on site at the moment. What's very grey at the back is a tennis court, very old one, but a hard surface tennis court is there at the back in the garden at the moment. So existing plans. Existing building is a period building. It's had some alterations to it over the years. Notably, it's a rather large front box door window at the moment. This is the proposed site plan. So proposed replacement dwelling. You can see re-landscaping is proposed in the garden, so digging up the old tennis court and laying to lawn, with some ancillary sitting spaces. Steps down here to the basement, some roof lights over the basement as well. The access would stay the same, but they would create driveway access here to a car lift that would go down into the basement. So dealing with the proposed basement itself, majority of it under the house proposed, swimming pool, and then the car garage at the back. So it's the proposed ground floor plan. You note the two feature bay windows at the front there, features as well at first floor level. So, typical large house accommodation proposed. Roof plan. You'll see traditional design approaches proposed. The flat roof section would actually be inset down, so that would not be visible behind the ridge of the building. Decorative door windows close to the front, one at the back. So this is the proposed house. Symmetrical in its appearance. Decorative dormer windows at the top. Obviously, large front porch here. Just the brick with handmade clay tile roof. And at the back, accommodation there. The chimneys proposed on both sides. On this side, to help break up the bulk massing, is a proposed gable feature coming out. The lean-to section actually would have a slate roof, just to provide variety. Existing and proposed comparisons. So, top is the existing, proposed is below. Site pictures. Apologies, again they've gone sideways. See if that can be. I'll see if I can sort that out a bit later. But that's it, front and rear. The tennis court you just make up. I will try and change that during speaking. Overall, the proposal would involve replacing dwelling in a prominent position over Wimbledon Common in the conservation area. Officers are satisfied that the proposed dwelling is of high quality design and appearance that would provide further contribution to the conservation area in replace of the existing dwelling. So overall, Chair, officers recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Evelyn Nasty-Whistle.
I am speaking to object to the proposed full demolition of 21 Parkside. The fact that amongst the representations there were 9 objections to its full demolition and only 6 means I'm not alone. I'd like to point out there were not 9 letters for its demolition as stated in the agenda paragraph 5.2, as that number includes the representations from the public and is misleading. The majority of public representations clearly lie in favour of the facade being kept. The current house was built around 1903 by the architect Lionel Littlewood, as referenced by the Heritage Collective. He was architect so respected of that time that recently the Cole Park estate in Twickenham, which was designed and built by him, chose to retain the estate as a conservation area, calling his work distinctive and authentic, much like 21 Parkside. It is a good example of his work which, apart from its roofline, has not been externally altered since it was built. The facade is unique within the stretch of Parkside with a magnificent porch, which as far as I'm aware has no parallel within the single private dwelling in the Wimbledon Conservation North area. I feel strongly that this should be preserved along the rest of the facade, which is multifaceted. It is much more varied and unique relief than the proposed solid brick facade. According to one of the representations against its full demolition, I quote, In terms of Merton Council's planning framework, the proposed development fails to accord with the framework most strongly in the following area, policy CS14 Design Section 5, which is, I quote, to retain and adapt existing buildings where appropriate to reduce CO2 emissions and secure sustainable development. Despite the agenda, paragraph 7.5 saying it is deemed acceptable, in this regard it does not appear to comply. Furthermore, as is stated in the agenda, paragraph 5.3, the Conservation Officer is totally against the demolition of 21 Parkside and feels, I quote, it adds a positive contribution to the conservation area. They go even further and state the house should be again, I quote, in chance rather than demolished. I ask myself, why have a Conservation Officer comment when their suggestions are totally ignored? The Council wisely, in my opinion, saw fit to keep the facade of number 23 Parkside when they allowed redevelopment of the building behind. They have more recently also kept the facade of number 20 Belvedere Grove, which has a lot less appeal than 21 Parkside. We agree the roofline of number 21 Parkside was converted unsympathetically in the 1960s, as the information says. But surely the roofline can be converted back to the original and the facade kept. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Muffin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Kath Mather, and my husband and I are the owners of 21 Parkside, but we propose to build a family house for us and our 4 children. This application is the result of 18 months liaising mostly with architects, your planning officers, the community, and our neighbours to ensure the scheme before you is in accordance with all applicable planning policies and is recommended for approval by the officers. Furthermore, initial plans which were amended to reflect comments received from our pre-app scheme 12 months ago. Due to the sensitivity and prominence of this site, we've worked with renowned Adam architects known for classical and traditional British architecture. The level of support for the resulting design that has been received by the Council from the local community clearly indicates people would like to see this scheme come forward and agree with us and your planning officers that it will enhance the setting of the War Memorial and the Common. Of note, all immediate neighbours are supportive of the proposal and are among the 10 letters of support received by the Council. This demonstrates the local community do not consider the current building and its unsympathetic alterations to be a threat and are supportive of the improvements proposed this evening. The War Memorial Trust, the Wimbledon Society and the Wimbledon Society confirmed no objection to our proposals, and the Parkside Residents Association and the group who maintain the grounds around the memorial support the application. Your tree officer, your flood risk officer, the highway officer, Thames Water have reviewed the application and have no objection. Historic England has no objection. The objections to the proposal have come from properties some distance from the site, including Clapham, Queenstown Road and Surrey. As lay people, we may have sentimental or subjective attachment to aspects of buildings we visit or see regularly. However, this does not make them of historical or architectural significance per se. Furthermore, where insensitive alterations made to properties such as dormer roof extensions, modernisations of front doors, and adorning a porch with lions, as has been the case in this house, original character is in fact lost. So whilst objectors may value features such as the entrance, which is a minor part of the facade and has been altered, the experts and local residents clearly do not, as seen by the heritage reports submitted. This report confirms the house was built by Lionel Littlewood, not a local architect, and with no properties anywhere in the country meriting a heritage listing. A more intact example of Littlewood's work at 16 Parkside Garden has been locally listed by Merton. In contrast, 21 Parkside is specifically identified within the Conservation Area Character Assessment as having been compromised by insensitive extensions and alterations, not just to the roof, but to other elevations as well. Whilst your Conservation Officer understandably would not wish to see any building replaced, this has to be looked at pragmatically. Planning policies require the proposed building to be assessed to see if it enhances the conservation area, as well as the setting of the neighbour listed building and the wall memorial. We, our immediate neighbours, local community groups and your planners believe it does. We ask that members accept your officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Howard, please.
Oh, that's me, sorry.
I have control. Thank you very much. Okay. Good evening. First of all, I have to say this is one of my
a number of appearances I've made before this panel, I'm happy to say that on this occasion I'm going to be speaking in favour of the Planning Office's recommendations. And I think, however, this has to be handled very sensitively, because we've already established, we know from the documentation, that this project has received widespread support from local residents and other important interested parties, including the War Memorial Trust has said, the Wimbledon Society, the Parkside Residents Association, and who have made no point of raising an objection at all. We also know that while the current building is an example of arts and craft and is specifically the work of Lionel Littlewood, it is not regarded, and I think even in the council officers, conservation officers' own comments, it was not regarded as being a remarkable specimen, a particularly good specimen of his work. And frankly, and perhaps even less regarded as a specimen, given the very visible and unsympathetic alterations effected by previous residents, presumably before planning restrictions came into force. Now that said, it is important to acknowledge the legitimate emotional attachment felt for the existing building, especially by those who have lived there. This is a place where they have perhaps enjoyed their childhood or raised families of their own. These are cherished memories, so to see the place where those memories were formed and demolished will cause a sense of loss. And for them, this isn't just a building, it was their home. Now that sense of loss will be real and is certainly to be respected, but I do not believe that it is reasonable on that basis to refuse permission for the construction of a new home, which by many accounts will enhance this focal point of the village. So I therefore support the Planning Officer's recommendation to grant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? No questions? Comments? Oh, one question.
No, I was waiting for
Comments?
I'm obviously not going to revisit it, but on the previous application I was talking about a knockdown and rebuilding, how incongruous I saw that and thought that was an example of how to do it very, very badly. I think this is an example of how to do it very well. The chimneys, the windows, the frontage, it all fits as far as we can see there, with properties to either side and around the rest of the area in question. It's just entirely in keeping with the rest of the area. I don't think we should have any problem with it. It is, as I say, an example of how to do a knockdown and rebuild well in keeping with the rest of the area. And unless anybody else wants to argue against it, otherwise we go straight to the vote and pass it.
Councillor Southgate.
Yeah, I'll argue against. Yes, the new design looks fine. The existing house, likewise, has. I've spent a lot of time looking at this over the years while I stood in front of the War Memorial on Remembrance Sunday, and it really comes down to what's the conservation area about. And given that this has been designed to be acceptable and very similar to what it's going to replace, would we prefer to have the original, or would we prefer a copy design, really just to come in under the radar and not ruffle too many feathers? I'd rather keep the original, absolutely would, but I don't think we've got a strong argument for doing that. But I still, if our conservation areas end up just being replacements, pastiches of what was there, then is there any justification in having them at all? I just raise that. I won't waste more of your time, Chair, but...
No other comments. I'm going to move to the vote. Can I see those in favour of recommendation, please? And those against? And not voting. And the recommendation is agreed and approved. We now go on to 36 Aston Road.
Thank you. Members, 36 Aston Road is a mid-terrace property in Aston Road. Currently a 2-bedroom property. proposal itself, so that's existing dwelling here, within the terrace house. The proposal itself is for a single-storey rear extension, rear door window including the roof, and an outbuilding at the back to allow for a conversion of the property to two flats. So one flat should be one bedroom, which would be on the ground floor. The other flat, which has been amended through the application process to be a one-bed unit split across two floors. The outbuilding itself is proposed to be used in association with the one-bedroom unit at ground floor level. That is to be an outdoor gym. The dormer itself will be tile hung, box-style door window, roof lights at the front, and a single-storey extension with 3 5-fold doors with a flat roof design. Apologies for the pictures. That's the front elevation. That's a view of the garden. The outbuilding was under construction at the time of the officer's site visit. That's the rear of the property, currently going through 2 renovations. Apologies for this. Disappointed with the focus on it. In terms of the merits of the proposal, so it is a conversion of a dwelling to 2. Given the proposed extensions, visually, I consider to be acceptable. Box on windows were not the best design. They are visible in the surrounding area, largely a lot of the conversion on the permitted building heights. The size of the flats are acceptable to meet the minimum space standard. Just also through the update sheet, we did have 2 further letters of raising objection to the proposal. Overall share. Officers are satisfied with the proposal as policy compliant. Thank you.
Sorry. So I've got Councillor Fairclough is speaking on behalf of objectors.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight I'm not speaking with my own words, I'm speaking on behalf of Chris Larkin, who is the Chair of the Apostles Residents Association, who for a number of reasons couldn't be here tonight. So these are his words. Indeed, but he didn't get the letter in time to notify him of tonight's meeting. So these are his words, not mine, but they largely relate to the precedents that the Apostles Residents Association believes that this application would set if it were approved. This particular decision has far-reaching consequences for our area. Indeed, our association was set up some 30 years ago precisely to campaign on the issue of preserving the family homes in our streets. In case the matter is heard tonight, let me briefly set out the reasons I believe the officers' reasons are invalid. We have based our submission on the Council's core strategy 22.27. When this strategy was agreed, we were very much involved in requesting the protection that's given against converting our family homes into independent flats. The Council at the time reassured us that the wordings as set out would offer us the protection we needed. We are therefore quite devastated that the planning officer is recommending permitting something which entirely goes against the intention of the Council. The planning officer's argument appears to be that because the house is currently 2 bedrooms, it does not fall within this part of the core strategy. However, let me point out that in fact all our properties in the Apostle Group, including 36 assets, were built as 3-bedroom family homes. Many people, as presumably happened in this property, converted one of the 3 bedrooms into a bathroom. Therefore, if you grant this application, you are in effect permitting people to convert a 3-bedroom house into a 2-bedroom house, and thus apply to convert it into 2 flats. Agreeing to this application would be to ignore the reality of the situation, and this leads to my second point. The way things happen here generally is that young people purchase one of the Apostles' houses as a 2-bedroom house, knowing full well that as and when they need to, they can convert it back to 3 bedrooms, albeit in a different configuration. If this application succeeds, it will allow developers to alter radically the nature of our area and will completely undermine the wish of the Council, as stated in the core strategy, to continue to provide family homes, something so desperately needed. I urge the committee, therefore, to reject this application as it represents the complete overturning of the spirit and detail of the Council's core strategy. And that brings to the end for us. Chris asked me to read it out.
Thank you. Bastian Brickland.
Hi there, good evening. I actually run a small building company, William Frederick & Co. I purchased 36 Aston Road in June 2019 with the intention to develop it. I currently live at 28 Aston Road with my fiancée. Our home is a ground floor masonette, so yeah, like I say, 4 doors up from number 36. When I purchased number 28, it had been empty and derelict for over 2 years. Over an 18-month period, we carried out extensive building work, including an outbuilding to the rear of the garden. A constant focus throughout the renovation was to remain in keeping with the character and history of the area. So this includes period front door, sash windows, recycling all the stock bricks that came out of the property, and I intend to do the same with number 36. In response to the majority of the objections, I do believe the family home is very important. However, 2 young families living opposite us in houses have recently chosen to relocate due to the restricted size of the terrace property, and this seems to be a common occurrence. Therefore, to conclude, converting the single property into 2 separate flats, I don't believe it's a loss of a family home, just rather an opportunity for 2 couples to enjoy living in a great road in a decent area of London. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we move to questions.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. Does the pitched outbuilding require consent to begin construction? And the second question, I note that one of the properties doesn't have any private amenity space, but my question is whether the front garden where the refuse will be kept, if that is communal or it's owned by the person on the bottom floor.
The outbuilding under construction, so you can start building an outbuilding in the garden if you wish to, without any permission. It just has to comply with Class E of the General Permitted Development Order. So it's unfortunate it's under construction, but it's the application to hopefully regularise that. In terms of the amenity space, there is no outbuilding space for the top floor flat, but the front, the small front area is to be communal, because that is where the indication has been installed to be cleaned, which will cover both flats.
Just to follow up quickly on that, it seems that there's only one bin proposed for both properties. So sort of one main refuse, one paper and card, and one mixed recycling. Although ordinarily you would either have, for a new build, I would have thought of this nature, you'd have communal bins, like a bin store that's shared, or you would have 2 sets of wheelie bins per property. Is there any reason why that hasn't been for this case?
In terms of bin storage, we would be expecting them to provide bin storage. Condition 5, we're seeking that to be submitted to us in terms of details. What we would expect is there 2 1-bedroom flats proposed, so we expect to comply with that, and it would be submitted to be at the front of them. So the bin storage would be under one communal storage to house the necessary bins that we need for 2 1-bedroom units.
Back in 2006, this council sought legal counsel with regard to protection of small family homes to stop them being turned into apartments. One of the arguments was that if you wanted to create the smallest possible family home with a ground floor and a garden, this would be it. So if you took these away, then no home, no house would exist. And the council at the time through its planning policies and its planning policies again next decade fully supported the protection of these family homes. And the letter was written on the 13th of July 2007 to the council leader at the time, and since then I know that at least tens and maybe hundreds of these 1,200 possible houses have come up for applications for planning, and each one has been rejected under this Queen's Council's protection. So the fact is that these aren't tiny if you go inside, but they are the perfect family house for London. And the ones which were converted are incredibly small and really very difficult to live in. As you see, you've got a one-bedroom flat over 2 floors. That shows how tiny it is. So what's happened in 2019 that has changed the legal counsel's opinion and protection since 13th of July 2007 until yesterday?
I haven't seen that letter, so I'm not aware of it. What we have done in this case is determine honest merits. As the existing property is a 2-bed property, the policy seeks to protect family-sized housing, which seems to be 3-bed properties or above. So that is the difficulty we have with the proposed report, you could say. But I would welcome a view of that letter at some point after this meeting.
Yeah, well, I think it's very, very important here because in the presentation there's nothing about bedrooms. It was about small family homes, in that they were below a certain size. I can't remember the particular statements, but I think it was, I don't know, so it's not worth me saying. But there's no doubt that you as officers would have seen many of these proposed, and not one of them has been accepted, and not one of them has come here in the last 12 years. So I think what's happened here is that you've erred from your statements, your policies, and allowed this to go through. And I think you need to defer this to go back to the reason why you've rejected every single other one in the apostles.
Questions? Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair. Page 30, 7.2.3, what it's saying that outbuildings, it is noticed that outbuilding was under construction during the site visit. Is it something to be, something legal, or is it going to start the building before the application has been granted?
That's not legal to do that.
Thanks.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. We've got one flat for 1 bed for 1 person, or 1 flat for 1 bed for 2 people. Could you give me the dimensions of those bedrooms, please? Preferably in feet, because that's the way my mind works. Yeah.
So I was just conversing now. The width of one of the bedrooms and the main bedroom at the front, I believe, is 2.7 metres or 8 foot 8 inches. Actually, it says 8.85 feet. I'm not quite sure what that means. 8 foot 8 or 8.85. But anyway, it's sure that's very close. And 3.7 metres is 12 foot, just over 12 foot.
9 by 12, that's a 2-person.
Yes.
And what's the 1-person bedroom size? That is the 1-bedroom. That is the 1-bedroom size.
For 2 people.
Yeah, but what about the bedroom that's for 1 person? The smaller size, the smaller bedroom.
Yeah, so the 1-bed unit, because there's one I just mentioned, which is the 12 by 9. That 2 unit, the 2-bedroom unit, the main bedroom there is slightly larger. Oh, so that's around the plan really seems to be slightly confusing. So it looks like the size in both units, the main bedroom seems to be about the same size. The size I mentioned.
Okay. Now, well, if both bedrooms are about the same size, and king size bed is 5'1", how is one of these flats designated for 1 person and the other flat designated for 2?
It's 1 bed. Yes. Sorry to report, it looks to be both 1-bed, 2-person flats. So you could easily get a double bed in either of those bedrooms. If the room is 9 foot wide and you've got a 5 foot wide bed, you've got 2 foot either side. I think that's the point.
So that means that the smaller flat doesn't meet the space requirements, does it? Because it's 44 square metres, and the requirement for a flat which accommodates 2 people is 58. This is page 31.
So the 58 square metres, that's based across 2 stories. So under the technical space standards, a 2-storey 1-bedroom unit has a minimum standard indicated as being 58 square metres.
But I think you've just established that we've got 2 flats and the bedrooms are roughly the same size, and by designating one of the flats, the smaller flat, for 1-person flat. No, but if you look at page 31, it says that both flats are 1 bedroom, one of them is for 1 person and the other is for 2 people. But both flats are the same size bedroom.
It gets round 58 square metres.
I should say, sorry, in terms of being the similar size, the smaller flat does have a smaller room. It's, yeah.
Councillor Ruff, yeah, I have caught your eye. Okay.
Thank you. Well, 2 things. First of all, I do think we need to explore the point that Councillor Dean raised. While I often don't agree with him, he does have a formidable memory for things that happened in the past. So I definitely think we need to explore that. The other thing is, I wonder if we could have some advice on this issue about the fact that these houses used to be 3-bedroom houses and now 2, and what the implication of saying that if you convert if you convert somewhere into 2 bedrooms, you then can run a coach and horses through these planning rules. I wonder if we could have some advice from officers on how that works. Thank you.
I think we have to look at each case on its merits. I mean, if we have knowledge that it was a 3-bedroom unit and we had recently converted to a 2-bedroom, and exactly what you're saying was potentially proposed. But of course, if you have a 3-bedroom unit and one was converted to a bathroom, for instance, had an outside toilet 30 years ago, they did it 30 years ago, I think it would be very unfair to say that was now a 3-bedroom unit. It's definitely a 2-bedroom unit. So we have to, each case on its merits, I believe, in terms of looking at that. At this moment in time, we've looked, this particular property, there's nothing to show as far as we're aware that it was a 3-bedroom unit. We haven't got any evidence. to that. If we looked into it deeply, we might find that evidence, but there's nothing obvious at this moment in time to say that it actually was a 3-bedroom unit.
Except that the houses were built as 3-bedroom units in that area. Councillor Wolf.
I was in the Richard piece earlier, which is the discrepancy between the report that was sent and the plans I was sent in the post and the plans I'm now seeing on screen. The proposed first floor plan there lists bed 1, bathroom, lounge. The ones I was sent at the end of last week, which I was referring to, list bed 1, bed 2 and bath. The plans for the proposed first floor of the new development is to make it a 2-bedroom flat. That's the plans I was looking at. And so my question is really, now that instead of ignoring the bathroom for a second, you've got bed 1 and lounge listed there, on the plans I've got, it says bed 1 and bed 2. Is there any reason, if we gave this planning permission, that the new owners of the property could not turn that lounge into a bedroom and make it a 2-bedroom flat?
I mean, once you grant planning permission for something, subsequently it doesn't often require planning permission to change any bedrooms in your house you're living in now. You can put bathrooms, bedrooms, do what you like with it, really. It doesn't really make any difference. What you're doing is trying to make a decision based on a standard at this moment in time. The reality is it can be changed in the future.
So my point is, in essence, the plans that I was sent show a 2-bedroom flat. And in essence, once you've granted planning permission, it is a 2-bedroom flat. It's listed as a 1-bedroom flat, it's actually a 2-bedroom flat.
Well, it annotates it as a lounge and drawing out looking at, but I understand what you're saying in terms of the future. As I say, any property can convert it in that sense.
Any other comments? Yeah, we've done questions.
Sure,
no more comments.
And
so, other more questions, sorry.
I don't know.
Right, okay. Comments, yeah.
So one of the reasons that there was a precedent is that what we see in terms of planning applications coming through this council, the belief, and it's followed through the development plans from 2000 to 2010 and 2010 to 2020, is that there needs to be a broad spectrum of family homes versus flats, so 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms. And the belief is that 3-bedroom plus should be at least 33%. Although I can't quantify it, I've never sat here and seen any application for a large number of houses. But I've certainly sat here and seen applications for a large number of flats. So that's the reason that this protection was there, and because these places are so tiny that it makes no sense to lose it. If this is passed, then the precedent will be tens, maybe hundreds of applications will come through, because that's how many have gone through here since 2006, when the Queen's Council protected these properties. And that's why this needs to be deferred, because I think the officers have forgotten what happened in 2006. Councillor David Williams knows precisely what happened, because he was the one that spoke to the Queen's Council, and Jane Curran will do too. This is not acceptable. This has always been thrown out in planning. We've not seen one of these since William Bryan was the chairman, and that was in 2006, when we threw out 7 different applications on one night based on this legal precedent. So I'm asking that this is either rejected on the basis that the 1-bedroom flat is trying to get around the square meterage. There's no doubt about that. And the 2-bedroom flat, by the looks of it, is trying to also get around that square meterage. But we should also reject it based on the legal protection that these houses have in the past.
Are there any other comments?
Yeah, my understanding is Councillor Dean was beginning to speak, that he was proposing to defer, and at the end of his speech seemed to be proposing to reject. I would, if he had proposed to defer, I would have seconded that. And can I formally make the proposal to defer, to look into the issues he's mentioning?
Yeah. I'd like to say something about it, but I don't often say much from the chair. But if you go to Gravely Ward, you'll find that so many of our family houses there have been converted. And having looked at the plan here, the core planning strategy 22-27, It makes me wonder about my ward and whether or not those 3-bedroom properties, which are, I want to go back and have a look at some of the properties to see whether they actually would stand up to this ruling. I'm very against the conversions of small family dwellings, and I would hate to see a precedent of being struck in that area. Generally speaking, converting a little house into flats is to make money. That's the main motive behind it, generally. And so, if you're happy to defer as a collective,
I mean, if we reject it, and
we have to have good plan reasons to do it.
It's the loss of a small family house. This is what Council Southgate. I'd still rather, if we're happy to reject it, loss of a family house is something that Council Southgate has talked about for many years here. I think it's section 1 or something. This is less than 100 square metres. Now, I would throw it out, and then it gives the councillors time, officers, to what I'm doing answer.
So yes, in terms of what's been said, clearly there's some issue there with the council's advice that you've had in 2007. We haven't seen that yet, because there could be circumstances whereby we could give a more robust reason for refusal if it came back to the committee next time round. So I think it's probably sensible. We do look into that. We look into the other issues that have been raised. And I would recommend that the application is deferred to you. So we'll look at those two issues.
Okay, and we'll talk about the application. Thank you. Move on to agenda items 11, which is 21A St Mary's Road. How many more items have
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application here at 21A St Mary's Road within Wimbledon. Current site comprises a sort of 1-bed unit above a garage, you could call it. Also some tree cover on the site and a small garden. The proposal itself is for to knock down and rebuild a pair of semi-detached dwellings. The dwellings will be accommodated over 4 floors. The basic materials proposed would be light cloth brickwork, slate roof, and double glazed bond aluminium windows. Off-street parking space was provided, 1 for each house, and amenity space at the back that exceeds 50 square metres for each house. This is the proposed site plan. See, the road has been staggered to comply with the general street scene in terms of dwellings there at the moment. So you have a basement, ground, first and second floor. You know, from the roof plan, there's a staggering aspect of the scheme. It wouldn't be a grey brick, that's come out wrong. It's proposed to be a light bar London brick, proposed with a slate roof. You'll see 2 side windows here, and front here, and the rear. So the site slopes up as you go into the site towards the back. So existing at the top and proposed below. You know, existing house next door, and some existing properties here as well. Recently, there's been permission granted for this dwelling here, which hasn't been constructed yet, but that's just to show and take that into account, as that is an extant permission which could be implemented. Some site pictures. To the right is their residential properties. So the sort of, you can see commercial appearance about them. That's the site itself here, and looking that way. So a lot of the tree cover would propose to be removed to make way for the dwellings, and that's the house to the left of the site as you look at the front. I believe there's updates for this application. Overall, Chair, officers are satisfied with 2 dwellings, but add to the capture of the street scene and will be acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Critter, please.
Thank you, Lady Chair, members of the Planning Applications Committee. My name is Susan Cusack and I'm the Chair. Oh, God. Sorry. My name is Susan Cusack and I'm the Chair and Planning Secretary of the Belvedere Estates Residents Association. This application does not in any way comply with DMD1 and DMD2, nor does it conserve and enhance the North Wimbledon Conservation Area. This is a total overdevelopment of the site, replacing a building of 60 square metres on a small site with 2 5-bedroom, 4-storey dwellings totaling 200 square metres. The site is approximately 15 metres by almost 18 metres deep, giving a total of 264 square metres. Using these figures, it's therefore possible to calculate approximately that the buildings alone represent 76% of the site. When the hard standing is added on, the area of the site covered is 91.5%. There's only 22.5 square metres of green space on the site, representing only 8.5%. Thus, closing the gap between houses in the North Wimbledon Conservation Area does not follow the Council's Sites and Policy Strategy DMD2, 4 and 5, respect the space between buildings where it contributes to the character of the area and complement the character and appearance of the wider setting. In the structural calculations for basement walls and slab by Mason Navarro Pledge, listed under retaining wall analysis, the address is 21 St Mary's Road. That's actually the house next door. We therefore cannot accept any of this information. The design access statement. This site is in an area of underground streams which poses a threat to the dwellings either side and beyond in Pine Grove. Tree loss. 10 trees plus 2 groups of trees plus 1 section of category C trees would all be felled, and T16 and maple, which would be within the patio of the left-hand property, could be severely compromised by the works. A Lawson cypress in a neighbouring garden to the rear could also be affected. In the ground investigation report, clay is not ideal for basements, as we're well aware of in this area of Wimbledon. There's a slope on site of over 8% from back to front. The report states that there's a history of seasoned shrink swell subsidence in the local area, and therefore subsidence could occur because of the presence of shrinkable London clay. We've personally seen in our own garden, which is about 20 metres away from 21A St Mary's Road, that London clay can become so compacted that it can support a water table. And then the potential impacts that have been highlighted by the applicant's own ground investigation report are hugely worrying. Land instability, reduction in soil strength, the binding effect of tree roots as a result of the loss of all the trees will cause loss of stability. Remember that there are 14 to 15 trees being removed from what is a relatively small site. Implications of deepened basements foundations on neighbouring properties should be considered. Excavation of the basement could result in structural damage to the road and or the footway. Sealing the ground surface by larger buildings and hard standing will result in decreased recharge to the underlying ground surface water. Sorry, all the above is in this applicant's own engineer's statements.
Thank you. Ralph, Angel and Joseph Edwards, you showing the time?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'd like to start off firstly saying I think out of the objections that we've received, we haven't actually had this one up front, but I think we've addressed a lot of the issues in it anyway. There's a lot of emphasis on the basement impacts, and whilst it highlighted some issues, they've been technically overcome. It was actually tested not only against Merton's guidance, but we subsequently tested it against Camden's slightly more stringent guidance. And it came back as acceptable. The overdevelopment, it's in keeping with the properties to either side. We've carried out that analysis, and it's actually been through the pre-application advice as well. This wasn't flagged as a concern. The flood risk has been mitigated with some subsequent information which was actually submitted, so some visuals, some materials, some information on the drainage from Mason Navarro Pledge came through, which I don't think was tabled here today, but it's been with the council for a while. And the trees, we've had a detailed tree report done. The ones that have been removed are of low risk. The one in the neighbour to the right hand side is actually already causing damage to the retaining structures and may need some work of its own. the one on the left-hand side is considered far enough away from the development to not be a concern. That's what it's about.
The current building on the proposed site is out of keeping and adds nothing to the street scene or the conservation area. The current street scene has various styles of architecture, and thus the current proposal has been designed in a style that complements rather than fights against its neighbours and is in accordance with all the comments recommended in the pre-application advice received from Merton Council. The properties sit 1.5 metres from each boundary line as recommended and do not project beyond the neighbours on either the front or the rear and follow the natural curve of the road. From a massing perspective, the properties are in keeping with neighbouring properties. Ridge lines have been respected and follow the slope of the street. All necessary basic impact assessments have been provided to Merton and do not highlight any risks and would therefore we would respect this application is approved.
Questions?
What's the building at the moment that's there? It makes no contribution. It's the current building.
Did you say the current building makes no contribution?
Well, the current building doesn't make a contribution to what is it?
Garage.
So it's a unit, a resident unit above the garage. So that's the building at the moment. The street scene drawing here, so you can just see existing there.
So the question is it used as a garage? Does somebody live there?
As far as we're aware, it's a separate unit that has its own garden at the back. And it's divided with I think the land used to be on Longmore properties on Highbury Road a while back, but that's been subsequently divided.
So that car there, is that your car? Or is that, so it's being used there, that garage is being used. So it has some benefit, yeah. It's not good.
Any other questions? Councillor Sun.
Yeah, I'm not visited, but does each property have 50 square metres of garden space?
Any other questions? Councillor Crowe.
On page 137, it says the site features 11 trees and 5 groups of trees. That's beginning to sound like an awful lot of trees, and I'm just curious how many there actually are and why we appear to be so relaxed about their disappearance.
In terms of the trees, so there is a large number of trees on the site, but they are category C trees, so you can see it here, a large number of them here. To be honest, it is in the road. There's a number of modern properties further down which has very limited tree cover on them. This, to be honest, is one of the last plots, you could say, that hasn't been redeveloped in that immediate area of the road. Opposite, behind those pictures taken, is the rears of houses in the close. So we acknowledge, whilst the proposal does remove a lot of trees, it has to be balanced with the provision for 2 new homes and making it 1 home in the assessment.
Councillor Suffolk.
Well, we're not in any way conditioning the replacement of the trees, are we? Requesting new trees to be planted.
We've got landscaping conditions proposed on there, and when that comes in, we'll consult our tree officer to see, but she has acknowledged, the tree officer, that there is limited room for new tree planting, but we'll see if we can get some in the landscaping scheme. But it's acknowledged there won't be anyone in the government see as existing on the site.
Any other questions? Comments? Councillor Dean.
It's disappointing when you see, you hear so much about climate change and toxic air, that you see a large number of trees cut down. And as much as you could argue the word landscaping has been used, it's effectively hard surfaces, without doubt. And it's very sad that the ugly building to the left, which I think is only about 10 years old, is going to be demolished. I just can't believe that. It's a huge amount of carbon that comes from building a house, demolishing a house, I just find unbelievable. I accept that's got nothing to do with today, but it just feels like these developments are just thrown up without any regard to the environment and to the long-term development of the area. And I think whichever way you look at this is an overdevelopment, and I think that it shouldn't be accepted based on essentially all hard standing, that this needs to be thought through, and a couple of smaller houses, if not one house, put on this site, and ensuring that it makes its contribution to the air quality in the area. And I would reject it on overdevelopment and ask them to come back with something that's more in keeping with what we as councillors and the council constantly talk about in terms of air quality and environment.
Any other... was that a comment? That was a comment.
Comment,
yeah. Yeah, sorry. Any other comments? Councillor
We've also talked in the past about 50% of garden space, but a bit on the footprint, and this one is excessive. 75% to be quoted by plan officer. 75% was the figure quoted by the plan officer for the footprint, which is why some of the trees had to be removed in the first place. It's too big. I think I agree with Councillor Dean.
Any other comments? Do you want to move? Oh, Councillor Stafford.
I'm not sure we can sustain refusal on grounds of overdevelopment, but I am concerned about the spread of really hard landscaping when these developments come up, and all you see is grey frontages and cars parked on them rather than trees. And the reasons we begin to understand more and more, we really do need to enhance the tree cover and not lose it. So I would want to see some assurances at the minimum that there will be replacement planting of trees.
Are there any other comments? Councillor Ward.
I don't agree with turning it down. I don't agree that it's a problem. This is in what you would call a very leafy area of the borough. If you look at the satellite photos of the area around, half a mile, quarter of a mile in every direction, there are trees everywhere. Losing a few trees off the side of the site and to make 2 large family homes. Earlier on again tonight, people were arguing we should have more family homes. We're having 2. Well, we're giving permission, if we pass this tonight, to build 2 sizable family homes for people in Merton who need sizable family homes. Yes, we should pass it.
Did you want to move the recommendation?
Yes, there's not a single park in Hillside Ward, and I'm not against development of this site, and I'm not against 2 family homes. What I'm arguing is that this doesn't help with air quality nor the climate change issues that we have, and we want to see those trees back, and I don't see a problem. I'd have to argue bulk and massing, I think, and see if other councillors agree that's their choice.
Seconder? So we've got a seconder. Okay, so we're going on bulk and mass, but with the issue around the trees, or lack of.
I don't know if you can argue that.
Well, we'd make reference, wouldn't we?
I think because there is a condition for landscaping, and if members approve the application, could bolster that particular condition to define more landscaping on the site and trees on the site if it's still to that stage. So at this moment in time, I wouldn't recommend refusal on that ground, but obviously in terms of bulk and mass, if members are keen on the size of it, etc., that would be something that could be defended.
Okay, so the motion is against the bulk and mass, is what we're voting on at the moment. So those in favour, please show. Those against? 5, so that falls. So in favour of the overall recommendation, those in favour, please show. Those against? Not voting. 2.
If we could condition the recommendation on the lines that
yeah, we can. Thank you. You've got that. Right. Wandle House agenda writing, because there's a couple of young fellas at the back. Yeah. I think they might need to go to bed at some point. If they've not nodded off already. Wandle House.
Attention to the modification sheet, you will see there's some condition that's been added in connection with this proposal. The proposals are for alterations and conversion of Grade 2 listed building to provide 3 flats. The works, just one moment. Members should already have done copies of the drawings for the proposals. The works entail demolition of a linked staircase to offices that were built some 40 or 50 years ago, and the erection of a new glazed link staircase. The application has been the subject of a number of objections. If you refer to the committee report, you can see the areas that they've covered. There have been positive responses from the conservation officer, the transport planner, and flood risk officer. There's also been a cautious response from the climate change officer. The principle of the development is supported by, is favoured by Historic England. The separation from the office block is seen as being positive. The setting of the building is also enhanced. Officers conclude no harmful impact on neighbour amenity, traffic or parking. Sustainability officers have drafted, on sustainability officers have drafted a one-off condition driving up the sustainability credentials of the listed building while at the same time seeking to safeguard the significant heritage asset which is the listed building. And recommendations to grant both planning permission and listed building consent.
Okay, we don't have any speakers for this, so straight questions. No? Comments? Good. Can't believe it. Okay, well I'll go straight to the vote then. Can I see those in favour, please? And those against? None. So that's unanimously agreed. And that's inclusive of the building. So by the time you have to find a picture, you do read it. You might have to go into your next application. So our next application is Chenab Court, London Road.
Chair, members, the proposal is to vary the section 106 in respect of affordable housing. The reason for bringing the proposal to PAC is set out in the introduction. Planning history leading to the development of the site is set out in the report. I would highlight an error on the planning history. Members' attention is drawn to page 987 of the agenda, in which it's noted that current planning application proposes to delete the affordable housing. There would appear to be two issues. First, whether the council is willing to accept an off-site contribution in lieu of on-site provision. Secondly, whether the contribution is reasonable having regard to guidance on viability matters. The report concludes that there are reasonable grounds in this instance to accept an off-site contribution. The report also considers that while the final offer made by the applicant falls short of what the independent assessment thinks should be the contribution, market conditions remain weak, and that endorsing the offer as it currently stands offers a pragmatic solution to the current impasse.
Questions? Anyone? Yes, Councillor Lanning.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question is to what extent do officers think that the modelling that has been done is robust, since we went from, I think, 174,000 to 500,000. Would that not suggest that the applicant doesn't necessarily rely on their own financial modelling, because wouldn't they just put the 500,000 up front to begin with?
Chair, if I can draw the attention to paragraph 720 and 723 of the report, the applicant's improved offer was on a notwithstanding basis. So the applicant had the viability of the scheme assessed in the manner that he considered appropriate. That was different from the modelling which which the independent assessor considered to be appropriate. But it's within the applicant's remit to make a notwithstanding offer in this particular instance. So what the applicant wasn't saying was that he necessarily agreed with the manner in which the viability of the scheme had been modelled. What he was simply saying was, I'm prepared to make an undertaking to offer a higher sum than that which my own assessor thinks is appropriate.
Any other questions?
Just to come back on that, why would a developer do that? If they thought their financial modelling was robust and it would be held up, and if we were to refuse it and they went to court and they could, pay less, essentially, why would they then decide to offer 450,000 and then up it to 500,000 in your view?
Well, unlike some schemes which come before committee, where we have a proposal to assess, this scheme was nearing completion. So in that respect, there was a degree of pressure, perhaps, in the mind of the applicant. He seemed to be making an improved offer, closer to that which the council felt was the minimum that should be accepted. Now, it's wrong for me to speculate on what was in the mind of the applicant, but suffice to say, through months of negotiation and digging our heels in and trying to consider alternative approaches to delivering affordable housing, we've now got to a position where an offer of £500,000 has been made in this instance. We have a duplicate application which has been we have an application which has been submitted to endorse changes to the drawings of the approved plans. There's nothing untoward here, it's just tidying up differences between what was shown on the original plans and what's in fact been built on site. that carries with it a submission to amend the legal agreement to delete all the affordable housing. You're right, the matter could be tested through the Lands Tribunal. There is no way at this very moment of me saying with a great degree of confidence that the council would prevail in terms of its assessment, or the applicant would prevail in terms of their assessment. So the council could pursue 639,000 and secure it, but then we would need to consider what the appropriate enforcement route would be, because we're not going to actually exact that money out of the developer, because the developer could simply keep properties empty, and then you have empty houses in Merton which have been completed, which could be housing people. And I'm sorry, but that's something which really doesn't play very well in terms of the objectives to not simply get houses built, but deliver homes.
Any other comments? Councillor Murphy.
Can I just make sure that I understood it? So I apologise because we haven't really had one recently like this. So we've had all sorts of different figures ranging from 924,000 to 74,000. Our latest figure is 639,000, and they're offering 500,000. We gave them planning permission on the condition that they put in certain affordable housing. So I'm not quite sure that I understand why we don't have the power to say, you agreed to that, deliver it. I find the whole thing a little bit confusing with all these different numbers. It's extraordinary that a process can come up with so many numbers, but okay. But I don't quite understand why we can't simply say to them, just deliver what you agreed to do when we gave you planning permission.
Chair, when the council considered the planning application back in 2014, the applicant offered 40% affordable housing with a split in terms of the rented units and the shared ownership units, which was policy compliant. On the basis that the scheme was offering 40% affordable housing, there was no requirement for a viability assessment to be provided, because it was providing affordable housing in accordance with our adopted policies. The applicant then sold the site. So the person that got planning permission isn't the person that now owns the site. And the debate here, and I've said that in the report, and this is at paragraph 712 on page 90, whether the price paid by the developer for the site was unduly optimistic may be open to question, but whether or not this was the case does not resolve the current impasse.
Essentially what happened is that somebody made a proposal, one side won, the other side lost, and then the goalposts were moved, and now what we see in front of us is a deal, and it's either take this deal or have the threat of no deal, and it's going to go to an external adjudicator, and we have to decide if we take the bird in the hand or wait for the bird in the bush.
Not the bush.
Right, well, you have probably just one day to do it, and you have to make up your mind. Judgment day.
Yeah. This would go for a long while, couldn't it? Councillor Southgate, it is 11, guys. Let's
So just very quickly,
succinct.
have all of the units been offered to a registered social landlord? I mean, that could be one route. I appreciate they probably aren't really interested in managing only 5 units, but that could be one way out for the developer.
Chair, a number of the units have been sold on the private market. So all the scheme can't be. It does have implications in terms of grant eligibility for a registered provider, but we're now in a position where a scheme that might have perhaps been attractive if we had gone above and beyond those number of units, that option's now been
There's only one deal on the table.
Yeah. So it's yes or no, really, isn't it? Should we? Let's put it to the vote. It's 4 to 2. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. 5.
Sorry, there's another hand.
Got 5. Those against? Not voting. 4 not voting, 1 against, and the rest. So it's carried. Okay, we now move on to TPO. TPO.
Yes, you see, we're trying to see to retain trees. We're nice to get them on the screen so you can see them. There's 5 in that sort of bush area in the front and a very large tree in the background there as well. So recommending that those are options.
Okay. Any questions about the TPO? No? Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. That's unanimous. And then we've got appeals. That's to note. And the enforcement report also to note. If you do have any queries that you want to raise with officers around enforcement, please can you speak to them directly. Thank you very much. Good night. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Linda.